All right, everybody. I think we're going to get started. I think people have started to join on the Zoom because we're still doing, doing things in the virtual, in-person, hybrid world. So just giving everyone a minute to take a seat. So many people embracing and catching up with each other. It's so wonderful to see. Hello. No, thank you for coming. All right, so good afternoon and welcome to the 4A's Agency Comms in Focus 2022 Summit. Thank you for coming. We're incredibly excited. I'm David Ford. I'm the Global Chief Communications Officer at Ogilvy and the co-chair of the Agency Comms Committee for the 4A's. We're very happy to be hosting everyone here at one of WPP's several campuses in Manhattan. This building is home to Ogilvy, Gray, and BCW, and a few other of our other agency partners. So we're very glad to have everyone here today. It is very nice to see people in person. When I first joined the committee, it was right before, I think, our last event in 2020. And it was virtual because we had just been, in the early throes of the pandemic. So it really is nice to have a group of people in person back together because, I think what we do as agency communications professionals, it really is a community. And there is something that's really special about when we all come together in person. There's a certain spark, a certain magic, a certain level of collaboration and community, which I think is a really strong and an important word. So I'm really glad that we're able to do a little bit of the in-person, a little bit of the virtual for people who aren't able to join us from other cities. So thank you again for coming. So I think, more so in the past 2 or 3 years, our jobs, I think, are incredibly unique. I think so many of us have started to have to wear 2, 3, 4 hats at a time, and our jobs have 5, 6, 7, 8 sometimes. And I think that's really, it's been a huge change over the past couple of years. And I think that's why forums like this are incredibly important, because I think us coming together, sharing those challenges, talking through them, talking about the strategies that we put in place to help bolster our agencies' reputations, but also, a lot of us are also have internal communications responsibilities, something that's been, never more important than over the past couple of years. So incredibly happy for the agenda that we have today. It's a pretty diverse agenda. We're going to hear from a number of our journalists and reporters and editors who cover us from, I don't want to leave anyone out, from The Drum, Adweek, Morning Brew, the Wall Street Journal. I think it's just helpful to get a sense of, as the industry keeps evolving, what they're interested in, what's their focus as we're going into the new year. And we have a number of great other panels on a range of topics, as you all know, because you signed up. And before we begin, I want to take a moment to thank our sponsor, NewsWhip, for their support. Later today, Brett, the president of NewsWhip, is going to be sharing some interesting insights on how to use real-time media monitoring and data to help us understand some of those critical moments that are happening in culture, which we are obviously always, as agencies, trying to latch onto. So excited to have Brett here a little bit later in the program. But I think you don't need to hear from me. You'll hear from me in a little bit. So let's get the program started. I couldn't be more thrilled that we're starting with this topic today and to welcome our first speaker. From her blog to her podcast to her work at Dentsu Creative, Kai Devereaux Lawson has used her lifelong passion for culture and nearly a decade of experience in advertising to tell honest stories that shed light on the need for diversity and inclusion in the workplace. In a world where perception is often translated as reality, the conversation of DE&I is at a pivotal moment. I think that's probably an understatement, requiring a narrative shift. So please join me in giving a warm welcome to Kai as she addresses the need for a more balanced and truthful narrative in DE&I spaces, and the bravery to challenge the instant gratification that I think a lot of people often seek. So welcome, Kai.
Mike, check. Thank you. So I'm going to start by grounding everybody in some context about me and my nerves so that we're all on the same playing field, right? So I just want to let you guys know I am terribly nervous to be up here, and I have no idea why, because we're family, right? Like, we work in the same industry, we've seen the same headlines in the trades, we work on a day-to-day basis to figure out what kinds of things we need to talk about in the context of DE&I. And so you should probably be more nervous than I am right now, right? And what I'm about to say. So I'll start there. Secondly, I am lacking sleep right now. So if I stumble through this conversation, I ask you for your grace. And I also ask you for your patience so I can get through it. Just bought a house and thinking about paint colors. So obviously not necessarily my best 100%. But what I can give you guys is my passion. What I can share with you all is my perspective through the lens of friendship, through the lens of being colleagues, and through the lens of honesty. And so I ask you just for a moment in time as I get through these next 25 minutes. I also encourage you all not necessarily to wait for questions, but also commentary at the end of my conversation today. There's a lot that I need to learn as well. There's perspective for us all to share. And so I'm not just here to be the subject matter expert, I'm also here to learn. And so I thank you all for allowing me to be here. So I'll start doing one thing, right? And just kind of ground myself in what gives me the right to be up here. That's something through the lens of cultural fluency that I encourage a lot of my colleagues to ask, right? When we're pitching to clients and we're talking about DEI, when folks want to know what the next thing is that Gen Z is discussing. Why am I here? What gives me the opportunity and allows me to sit on a pedestal and tell you all about the work that you do? Because no, I'm not in communications in that context. I don't necessarily work at the trades. I'm just a girl that got into the advertising business about 12 years ago and somehow found herself talking a lot of smack about the lack of DEI in the industry. And then went on to turn it into a blog and a podcast that somehow gave me the opportunity to meet Miss Judy Jackson, who you'll hear from later, who literally gave me an opportunity, probably against her best interest, to talk about DEI, right? I love this business. I love what we do. I love that we're able to shift behavior. I actually am one of those people that thinks that a lot of the work that we do is actually just as critical as solving the world's biggest challenges, like perhaps doing research for cancer, or perhaps figuring out, how do we get sustainable clean water? I believe that what we do on a day-to-day basis is focus on people's behaviors. We set the tone for how people see the world outside of what exists on their front step. We set the tone for how people feel about their neighbors. We set the tone for how people use products. We set the tone for a lot of the beliefs that people have today, for better and for worse. If you know, you know. And so with that, it's important for me to partner with a lot of folks within the industry to help tell more well-rounded stories when it comes to DEI. And so as we said earlier, right, in a world where perception is often translated as reality, we are at a critical point where we have to tell more well-rounded stories. Right now, most people can probably point out exactly what is wrong with DEI. They can tell you that we're tired of hearing that we can't find talent. They will tell you that there hasn't been progress in the existence of DEI leaders, and so we can't move forward. They will tell you that they're even just tired of talking about the conversation of DEI. DEI fatigue, anybody? Keep hearing that coming up, right? But the reality is we live in a swirl of echo chambers where only people who are aware and are working on the DEI projects actually have a true understanding of what progress is happening. It happens little by little, and then all of a sudden it's different. So nuanced that we rarely recognize when the change actually happens. And this is a swift shift from when I started talking about DEI. If you ever have a chance to go and listen to Mixed Company podcast on all the social platforms, and of course, iTunes and Stitcher, et cetera, you'll hear a lot of my commentary being about my own personal experiences with the lack of inclusion in the industry, working as a junior project manager to a senior digital producer, as well as what I read in the trades at the time, a lot of the headlines with the lack of diversity. But what I get to see in my new role being SVP of Inclusion at Dentsu Creative is the other side to that. So I apologize in retrospect to anyone I may have offended over the course of my career, but I also share these few things that I've learned. And so I believe that our communications communities in partnerships with our DEI leaders and our C-suite leaders and our mid-level leaders have a significant role and responsibility to shift beyond what's easy to point out, which is the negative, right? We need to start thinking about who are we servicing when we're putting out our messaging. We have to think, is this really about the quick headline? Are we creating opportunities just for headlines? Or are we actually working together to shift a narrative? And so as our leaders, such as myself and others, continue to combat the existing challenges associated with bias and systemic inequities, I believe that we need a more balanced and truthful narrative. And so I'm charging each of you here, and those of you that I believe are right there in that camera, no idea. Shout out to you if you have sweatpants on. I wish I did too. But I believe that together, we can work together to give DEI the much needed publicist that it deserves, to be able to tell a more well-rounded end-to-end story. And so for each of you, regardless of how you actually play in this space or engage with DEI in your organization, be it the trades, be it at an agency, be it at a brand, that there are a few things that we could actually do together to help tell this story. And so the first thing is, I believe that our comms leaders, AKA our DEI publicists, can actually do a really good job of helping us tell better or hold our systems more and better account or have better accountability within our systems, right? And so what does that mean? And I'm going to have a hot take on this. For the last 3 years, we've really focused on pulling out data. Who's been able to share their DEI representation data? Do you have DEI representation data? If you don't share your DEI representation data, then you're not really here for the change in diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so I think that there is some truth to that, but I'll tell you where I'd like to see us push further. It's not about having the DEI representation data. You have the data, you know your composition, so what? People are working within your organizations. You probably have met your KPI or two in terms of how many professionals of a specific community that you have. And that tells you nothing about their experience. And so the conversations that I'd like to see being pushed forth from our friends on the communication side of the business, I'd like to see us go a little bit deeper. Even if you're not sharing your data, what are you doing with the information that you have that you cannot share? How is that data actually helping to impact the systems and the processes and the behaviors that we exert on a day-to-day basis within our companies? I was going to say agencies, but I recognize everyone doesn't work in an agency. Is this actually impacting your creative process? Are we using that data to understand how we're better able to staff up our teams? Is this affecting our media processes? Are we using our diversity data to understand better how we can invest in our media partners and invest in outside partners and vendors? Are we using that data to actually showcase exactly where we need to focus our attention on the hiring, right? So not necessarily like we don't see the faces, but what perspectives are we missing? It's not necessarily about who has what, right? It's not necessarily about who we invite to the table. We've got that DEI poem that everyone says, right? It's not about being invited to the dance. It's about being asked to dance or whatever the kids are saying these days, right? It is more about what we actually have people saying and doing at the table that's important. And those are the stories that we don't necessarily hear much about. I don't know if they're getting pitched, but I'll say this to everyone. Even if you don't think that it's going to get picked up, I'd like to see more folks pitching about what we're doing with the data. And on the trade side, what I'd love to see more of are stories that actually reflect that. Who are you telling these stories for? I'll give you an idea of what the audience looks like. The audience will look like someone who wants to come into the advertising industry. Right now, this past summer, when I spoke to some interns, not necessarily just from Dentsu Creative, but around the industry, a lot of folks said that they're scared to join our industry because there's so much talk about what we don't have, what we don't do, who we don't choose, who we don't hire. We're already giving out the perspective that there's no chance for success in this industry. But we have the opportunity to change that, right? We do that for our clients, we do it for ourselves, we do it with our partnerships. So I do think that we need to change that narrative about what is possible, who can succeed, what successes they do have, and sharing that more broadly than just the negative. I'm not saying don't talk about what's wrong. Let's continue doing that. But for the sake of me and the retention of my own job and this mortgage that I need to be able to pay, it is going to be important to make sure that we count our successes just as equally. Additionally, I believe that our comms leaders can help our diverse talent advance professionally. So we do know the truth. People of color are underrepresented. Women are underrepresented, particularly in leadership roles. There are very few conversations about folks who identify as having a disability. There are tons of conversations about the lack of diversity in age, and so on and so forth, right? But here's the thing. I often find that when we're looking at our talent, and we talk about how there's a lack of talent in the industry, that it's not necessarily the lack of talent that's most important, but the strength of the voices of the talent that we do have that needs to be amplified. There are more than 5 people within this industry who are of color, who have gender diversity, who identify with gender diversity, or who identify as having disability and different ages, et cetera, but we're not hearing from them. And I'll tell you why, at least from the perspective of being a woman and also a person of color. They're stuck in different levels than we're used to highlighting. We often highlight our executives, shout out to everyone that gets there. Such and such just joined this company and they're the new CE something. That's exciting. They're often the folks who've won awards. Shout out to award season coming up. I know many of you are breaking your wrists trying to put together your case studies for your organizations. But where we're missing a lot of the perspective are from the people that are doing the job on a day-to-day basis, our creatives that are stuck in that middle because they're not necessarily seen as award-winning creatives. Are women that are stuck trying to get to their executive level positions because they're seen as not necessarily bringing fame to the agency. So my call to action to all of you, to all of us, let's make them famous. Let's make these people famous, even though they don't necessarily fit into the box of recognition and awarding that we normally do, because that's where the diversity is. That's where you'll find your people of color who can speak to creativity without always having to say, as a person of color, I believe. That's where we'll find women who can actually speak to leadership as they're often managing families, whether it is their own nuclear families or extended families and caretaking. That's where they're also managing teams of 6, 7, 8, sometimes 20 people at a time. I'm sure more, I've heard more in recent weeks. Nothing says to me someone's a leader than someone who can manage both a household, an extended family, a shopping trip, picking up paint for a house, but also a team of 25 to 30 people to make sure that they see a future in their careers. I'd like to hear from them more. And what that does in terms of helping their careers grow is that it does something that it did for me through the podcast. The more people see you spotlit, the more people see that you're talking on stages, they automatically perceive you to be important, with or without a Cannes Lion. And shout out to Cannes Lions. No hate, no judgment. But they're automatically seen as important and relevant and and fundamentally imperative for the business experience and for the business experience as a whole. And that's something easy we can do. And we don't just need to ask them to speak when it's Black History Month either. They don't just have to speak during Pride or be on panels during Women's History Month. They can do more. They can speak to the actual work they do. These are the folks who are on the phones with the clients, however many hours are in a day. If there's 24 hours in a day, I guarantee you they're working at least 14 of them. They know it more than we do. They are the subject matter experts. And so again, the call to action there is let's make them famous. Let's help them advance their careers in that way. The next piece that I'd like to share is that I believe that our comms leaders can help us build a more well-rounded narrative of the DEI conversation. And so here's where I might ruffle feathers, right? I know that the last 3 years has been extremely eye-opening for many of us. But I would challenge you all to understand that the last 3 years are only a small microcosm of what folks have experienced, particularly in this industry, for over 60 years. I'd say 100, but I know advertising as we know it has been around since at least the 1950s, right? So since the 1950s, there have been conversations about racial reckonings, and there have been conversation about the lack of diversity. The NAACP, in fact, in 1963, actually brought to the table conversations with about 125 agency executives, what they needed to do to increase their diversity. That's in 1963. It's about to be, or I believe this conversation today is about what we're doing in 2023. It's been a long time. And it's not to say that we can't acknowledge what happened 3 years ago. It was a lot. It was strenuous. But I will say for many of us, it does seem very minimizing when we hear the conversation about DEI being in terms of our eyes widening in the last 3 years. Many of us have actually experienced that widening of our eyes for far longer than 3 years. And so I'd like us to have that context so that we can tell broader, better, and more well-rounded stories. Stories about what's actually changed since 1963. We're here with the 4A's. A part of those conversations that stemmed from the 60s actually did, and somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, but actually did directly tie to the establishment of the MAPE program, which many of our organizations take part in, which came to light or to launch in the 1970s. That's a direct result. Is it huge? I don't know. It depends on what scale you're using. I think it is. It definitely was a shift in conversation, because before the 1960s, no one was looking for a multicultural platform to put people into positions where they can excel in this industry. Another area where we could be talking about is what's changed, at least since 2006. There was a New York City lawsuit, if you will, that happened on Madison Avenue. Some of you are nodding your heads. The rest of you are probably talking about what happened in 2006, elementary school, high school, anybody? I was in high school, totally fine. But during 2006, once that conversation got to the city of New York, and we were able to have conversations with executives at some of our biggest agencies at the time, like a Young and Rubicam, I believe, if you guys remember that back in the day, shout out to BMLYNR. We actually saw an increase in the populations of people that were being recruited into the industry. That was a change. Did it stagnate? 100%, because the conversation stopped, because our memories became shorter, because we forgot that we had made pledges and promises. And so every time that something happens and we forget about what happened in the previous decade, we start the cycle of doing the research again, writing the op-eds again, calls to actions that have existed since the 60s. So my challenge to you all is to just acclimate yourself a little bit more to the DEI story, perhaps beyond what you may know, perhaps beyond what's been in the headlines for the last 3 years. And let's start connecting those dots. Where did we leave off? Who haven't we hired? What area of the business have we not talked about DEI within? The next area that I'd like to share with you all, as I fight through my phone, is a rather selfish one. It's for me. I need help. As I said, I'm tired, really tired. One of the things that's really unfortunate, and myself even, and Judy can tell you, I didn't necessarily want to be a DEI leader. I did not. Why? Because DEI leaders aren't necessarily known to be given the best budgets, the best resources, the best support, acknowledgement, if any. Who wants a job where they're never going to be told that they can succeed? Definitely not the job I wanted. But I believe in the universe and a God, and so I had to do what I was told so that my apartment didn't get struck down. And so I ended up here. But what I'm trying to say to you is that the morale of our DEI leaders is constantly in a state of negative. I've seen so many articles, and perhaps rightfully so, where the perspective is, all of the DEI leaders that have been hired in the last few years are just for optics. And perhaps in some positions they have been. I can say I have not been, but that's not the context for everyone, right? And so what we need your help doing is telling more stories about our wins, even the most micro wins. I've heard someone say in the past that, well, those aren't necessarily the headlines that are going to capture people's attention. Nobody necessarily wants to read about the small wins, but you know what? My peers do. We really do want to know about what everyone else is doing. What other programs are you starting that aren't necessarily another mentorship program, another program that brings in interns? What are the other more subtle pieces that are happening within the walls of DEI that we should be talking about? One win specifically that I find that people overlook all the time is family leave. Back in the day, it used to be maternity leave and for a few short weeks, right? Eventually that expanded to paternity leave because, dads are parents too. And then we started having conversations in the industry about what it actually means to be a caretaker and to have a family, right? As you're a caretaker and you have a family, you need the opportunity to be able to go and service that family as well. That's a DEI win that we've been able to go, let's say 20 years ago from just maternity leave to here in 2022, family leave. Those are the types of wins we should be talking about. They're not always going to be headline grabbing. They're not always going to be exciting, but they will always be wins that allow us the stamina to continue to do our work so that we're not dragging in here tired, worried about pain. And so I know I'm supposed to allow for time for Q&A, and I cheated myself out of 5 minutes, I'll give you that. But I will stop here just in case. Are there questions? Just in case there are questions. Okay, Judy Jackson has a question. Okay, I'll take that. Okay.
So Kai, you said earlier that you didn't, and when you were doing your blogs and so forth and your podcast, you would not berate, but you would certainly point out what's lacking from DEI and what's lacking from DEI leaders. But let me tell you what's beautiful. You took that frustration and you turned it into action to affect change inside the organization. So I want everyone to applaud you because you took that experience and you turned it into power.
Thank you. Comments. We got 3 minutes and 12 seconds, or I will say my last point that I was going to hide. Okay.
I work with Kai, so this is a comment. Just join Judy. I guess I will stand up too. Kai, could you talk a little bit about some of the background work that you've been doing with trades and others? Because again, in this push of what the comms professional and being that sidekick with Kai is not the headlines that we get, but some of the conversations that we can foster in the background so that we have better reporting in ad trades and other things. But I'd love you to talk about it a bit.
So I know that traditionally it's called background. I call it giving context, and let me not pat my mic down, but I call it giving context. It goes back to that point where I feel like we just need to tell a more well-rounded story. But I recognize that in order to tell that story, you need the context, the short history lesson. What is it that we're missing? The nuances. I'll give an example, not an example I was a part of, but I think an example where some background could be helpful. As we are putting out headlines about people of color, it's very important for us to be very specific about the words we use in headlines and throughout the articles and how we describe them. Of course, we know that mainstream professionals, I'll leave it as that, probably can fail. You can skip jobs 4 times in 4 years, right? When a woman is told, especially a woman of color is told that she is known for skipping her jobs, as I was for a while, that's actually seen as a negative to many people. It signals to some people that we're not necessarily, we don't necessarily have the resilience. We probably aren't good team players. What's going on that you can't stay at a company for a long time? And so when this actually happened in real life on social media a few years ago, people were pissed because yet again, it's another person of color, woman of color, that is being signaled likely unintentionally, I believe unintentionally to the outside world, that she wasn't good enough, that she can't do the job, that maybe she is just here for show. And so I think that one of the areas that we get ahead of that is sharing context for why people of color move from job to job so frequently. And that's not necessarily to be quoted. It's not necessarily to make sure that we make it into a byline, but really and truly, it's to make sure that each of you are equipped with the cultural fluency that's needed to understand how the words that we're using with women, people of color, people who identify as having a disability, people of different ages are perceived to the outside world. We live in a world right now where we can't say the same thing for everyone, but we have to be intentional about how we say it to make sure that it's received from our external audiences in a way that's truthful and authentic. So I hope that answers that question. People are shaking their heads. Yes, so I think I did okay. Well, I have 8 seconds left and probably more like an hour of things that I could converse with you all about, but I think I'm here for the afternoon. So if you see me, just say what's up. Let me know how you think. Reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm happy to have conversations and make new friends in this circle of trust that we've established today. So thank you all. Please welcome back David Ford.
Awesome.
I think this works.
Thank you.
Am I on? Well, I want to, Ken, come on up, just because, everybody, Ken Hine, US Editor for the Drum.
Hang on. Okay.
I'm just gonna.
Are we standing?
Well, let's just sit. Let's make ourselves comfortable. Is that okay?
It's so nice to be here in person.
I know. I'm glad to have you join us.
Thank you so much.
And give Kai another round of applause.
Yeah, that was amazing.
It's not easy to come up here for like 25 minutes and do what she did. So
And crush it.
And crush it.
Yeah.
And crush it. So props to her. Well, Ken, thanks for joining us today. These are our lightning rounds, so we'll do a few of them throughout the day. I guess I just want to start with, you've been at the Drum now, I think, for 2.5 years, maybe
2.5. After 10 years in PR.
I was going to say, and after being on the other side with all of us, what in the 2.5 years that you've been at the Drum, what do you feel like is the biggest kind of misperception necessary about the Drum, and what are like the few top things that you want to make sure we walk away with today?
All right. Well, I think I did bring a slide.
You did, I think, bring some slides.
Yes. So it's, I would say the biggest perception is, or misperception is our scale, really. We are now and I guess if anybody actually knew this, I'd be amazed. We're the third largest ad trade in the US.
Here we go. We have slides.
Number 2 globally, and number 1 in the UK. So how many people in this room actually knew that? You gonna raise your hand? Wow, right on.
Few.
All right. So yeah, I mean, I think that the thing about the Drum that people don't often understand is the scale, but also the globality of it, which is something I absolutely love, like having been at the Dentsus of the world and even Gyro, which got acquired. But I love working with a global team, and we have a legit global perspective. Like our Slack thread, we just hired a new APAC editor, Danielle Long, who's amazing. We're talking about what's happening in the world in marketing to each other. What does this mean, to you? Should we cover this? What's the spin? So I think our size and our globality are really 2 big points of differentiation. And the other thing is we really love creativity. And I feel like it's something that doesn't get covered enough often. And we just launched US Ad of the Day. So send all your work to Audrey. The next slide's actually going to be our staff. You don't have to go there yet. But I know there's a lot of confusion about who does what. So we're going to send this deck out after.
You don't have to worry about taking notes.
Yeah,
we'll send it out afterwards.
So, but yeah, so we're going to be covering creativity a lot. And then op-eds. I mean, there's so many powerful voices in this industry. I know I used to pitch them all like crazy with mixed results. But we're interested. I mean, I just got one this morning from the 4A's and I read it. I'm like, that's awesome. And we put it up in 5 minutes. So that happens.
That's awesome. Just on that point, because I think one of the things that comes up sometimes, especially when it comes to things like op-eds and contributed pieces, is the balance between earned and organic versus paid.
Right.
Can you just give a little bit of clarity to everyone around kind of the Drum's philosophy on that?
Yeah. So I mean,
you are the US editor, so I'm.
Yeah. No, editorially, it has to be something that's a provocative, counterintuitive, insightful thing. The pay-for-play stuff, we have all those products just like everybody else, and that's a totally different conversation that we can hook you up with our salespeople. I'm sure they'd be happy to sell you on it, but that does exist. However, for op-eds, I mean, there's just so many powerful voices in the industry. Happy to hear from them, especially if it's something that's timely, and those stories do very well. If you can react and just, there's certain people I go to, I'm like, did you see that? What do you think? And they send me something back in a couple hours, and it does really well. So what else? Exclusives. Yeah. So we're competitive. I mean, we're competitive with everybody else. If you want to get our attention, it's really hard to get our attention, by the way. And I already apologize. I've had a few people say that, hey, you haven't gotten back to me. I'm like, I've been in your chairs. It sucks when people don't, why didn't Ken get back to you? I thought you knew. I know people here 20 years. I want to get back to you, but it's just this block of blue stuff. And it's
worse when you go into a meeting and you come out and it's just the block of unread messages. I'm sure it's even worse for you because there's a lot of us and there's only one of you.
And I feel that sincerely. And
on the exclusives point, obviously, I think and this is something that we'll probably touch with other editors throughout the day. Are there areas of exclusives that you want to lean into versus things that you want to I think you have the what we do, what we don't, like kind of, where does that kind of fit for you?
well, I mean, you can give us a shot with all of them. I mean, one of the funny things about the work too is I've had conversations with people who are like, they think because it's not Coke or Nike or something that we're not going to be interested. Like, I love strategic stories. I love brand reinventions. I love B2B. Like, I was at a B2B agency for 8 years. Like,
Thank you. We like B2B too.
I know. We might have pitched against you guys a couple times, but so it was as long as there's something there, a real story that, you guys all know what news is. You guys have done this forever, and the people who are new to it, like the talent's there to know what we're going to be interested in. But so yeah, what else? High level interviews. Like, we don't love people stories. There's always like,
which I think is a lot of us are always getting pressure, especially when we have a new hire, to get kind of a story on, this new person that joined. And I think when we were talking about this a week or so ago, I think it's a good point of sometimes it's not necessarily like the story about the hire as it is like the person who comes in has been here for 3 to 6 months. And like that's sometimes I think more of an interesting story because they've gotten the chance to like get their feet under them.
Yeah.
You're starting to see kind of how they're having an impact. That's the kind of thing that I think you guys are.
Yeah. What I'm always saying is like, give them a chance to unpack their stapler and then come back and like talk to me about like, this is what I think we're going to do strategically. We are interested in acquisition stories because the industry is changing so much and people are all selling different products and you need these different resources to do that. But we're not so much interested in like, somebody just won United Airlines. Like, we're not going to, that's not our game. Other people do that. They do it great, hats off to them. But we are interested, like if WPP wins Coke, like drilling into that, like what happened there, what's going on, what's happening now, checking in with that. So stuff like that's really interesting. And then one of the things, because I made the do like list, is follow-up emails. Like, sincerely, I used to be so paranoid about this because I was a brand week and ad week, and then I went to PR, and then I was afraid to pitch people and follow up. And then I'm like, oh, they must be so annoyed with me. But the reality is it's like, you can follow up with me anytime and just be like, have you seen this? Like, I really think you'll like this. And I'll be like, oh, I'm so sorry, because it just gets lost. Even the op-ed that was pitched to me today, I sent them Jen Reese, I'm like, did I imagine it or did you send me an op-ed? And then she's like, and also feel free, you'll see my stuff on the next slide. You can pitch multiple of us on an email. Like, we are so egoless and we don't compete with one another. Some of us will see it and pick it up like, oh, I'll take that. That's really cool. Like, you probably don't hit all of us with every pitch, but like, if you don't know, like hit you, and you can pitch me anytime. Like that's
super helpful because I think also we know that like every publication is a little different in terms of the dynamic between and the way that they're structured, and you also want to be respectful of not, you don't want duplicated work, because I've had that happen where I've had someone on my team
really well.
dual pitch someone, and then you've had 2 people assign the same story, and then we look like idiots on our end.
We might have done that last week.
Yeah.
We might have read the same story. That's okay. It happens. But anyway, so just real quick, we're going to be doing a new podcast in January for the US. And I'm remiss to not have said we had the 2 best years ever in the history of the drum this year and last. And we've been around for a long time. Gordon and Nick made it when he was 19, and he's got gray in his beard like I do. So things are going real well. But can you go back to the staff really quick?
Yep.
Yeah.
There you go.
So it's just so you know, so you can read all this at home later, but you should make friends with Tiffany because she does speakers and judges. This is not pay for play in any way, shape, or form. This is like, she needs speakers, she needs judges. Isabella, any questions about awards? I'll touch on that really quick. Sam does all sorts of agency things. You don't have to be a global agency, and he's totally equal with who he'll put in his articles. Like, he doesn't have favorites. Like, he's very cool about it. If you need a direct hit in the UK, like Jen is the person who assigns, and Danielle is the brand new APAC editor. All right, slide 3. We only have 1:38. All right, so this is like, nobody else has seen this, but everybody here. So this is
hot off
twisting
the presses.
arms. But the key is, so we took all of our confusing award schemes. So I've been brutally honest with the drum since I started, and they have not fired me about everything that's wrong with some of the things that we did. And one of the things is we had all these awards all over the place and nobody knew what they were, when to enter, So we're aware. So what we did is we put them in March. There's going to be a US award show, APAC, EMEA, different. And then in December will be all of the other stuff that had been separate, like out of home, B2B, blah, blah, blah. So, and those are the deadlines.
Condensed into 2.
And easy.
It makes it so much easier. I think that's been one of the hardest things, is there's so many different awards, so many different categories.
Yeah.
I think having this is so much so much simpler and will be, I think, more enticing for us to engage with the awards program. So
That's the goal. But yeah, so we'll be at all the tent poles. We'll be at Cannes. I'm sure I'm forgetting something, but
I know we only have about 30 seconds left. Is there anything that, as you're going into the new year, any one trend topic that you're most interested in?
Retail media is interesting. I wonder if we're all going to think the metaverse was really cute this year. Creativity. Did I mention that? Make sure to send us the work.
I was going to say thank you. Thank you for.
Oh, and send us credits too, which I know everybody loves collecting credits.
And
That's always a
you
good-
said you
that's
don't
always a good-
mind. You don't mind when we reach out and ask for corrections too, or ads. So
But
on behalf of all of us,
I may
thank
not see them. No, but seriously, no, if I can, I'll change it. I mean, I know how that is. Like, it's like, oh, nobody pays attention until they see it.
Well, and
They're like,
I think also to the point that Kai made earlier, I think it is really important, credits, and I think for all of us to make sure that, sometimes we try to squeeze the credits and we get them too much down. Those are the opportunities too for talent to get discovered when they're attached to great work. So I appreciate that kind of last point.
And super last point, we're growing, we're adding more bodies next year, more staff, covering more broad stuff. So
Well, listen, we like
stuff to come.
we like to see when the trades are growing and are successful, because it means that the industry as a whole is healthy and growing as well. So
Wonderful.
thank you, Ken.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks.
Please welcome Suzanne McGee. Well, I'm excited. Can you guys hear me? Everyone in virtual land, I hope you can hear me. I like to ask. I will just take one moment. I love this event. I'm very biased. You are my people, but do network while you're here. There are some great brains, both here and online. So take a moment, meet your neighbor, because this is the group that knows what you do, unlike your parents or even your coworkers. So please take a moment and be sure to do that. I am very lucky because I'm excited about my panel. I've met all these folks, but we have a pinch hitter today, and I'm very grateful. Ali, unfortunately, has COVID, so he is not here today. However, at about 2 hours notice, Lindsay Bennett from Gale is going to join us. And then Chapin Clark from RGA, and Judy Jackson, who just retired, but is going to explain what she's doing now. If you guys want to come up. Come on over. So we designed this panel to think about our crazy jobs, but also have a chance to talk about what some of these folks do and do really well. So we wanted to represent TikTok, and we wanted to represent Twitter and LinkedIn. So each of these have a wonderful expertise and a style, all very different. And please, if you have questions as we go, feel free to ask. This is your chance. I'm already set to grill Chapin in a moment, but I'd first like them to introduce themselves. So if you guys want to say who you are and what you do, that'd be great.
Yeah, I guess I'm right here. So I'm the ring in, as mentioned, filling in for Ollie. So that's my disclaimer. I oversee marketing, communications, and new business at Gale. Another disclaimer is that I have been there for 3 months and 3 days, something like that. So I'm going to speak about my experience at Gale, but also my other agency experience with TikTok over the last 2 years.
Chapin Clark, executive creative director, copywriter by trade at RGA. I've been managing the Twitter account since 2008, 2009. And by contrast, I've been at RGA like 22 years. So it's the only agency I've ever known. So yeah, happy to be here.
You're the ideal dream, right? Judy Jackson. I just started my own consulting firm effective September 29th of this year. All of my career has pretty much been in the human resources field. And in 2019, I took on a new role as the global head of culture for WPP, helping to create an environment where everyone can thrive and feel like they're part of one company. And I hope to take that spirit into other environments and companies that I engage with.
Thank you all. I'm going to start with Chapin, and I won't make you raise your hand, but I've been in ad land for a while, and I've had a number of creatives come up to me and say, we want that Twitter thing that RGA has. And what they don't know when they ask me typically is that I was at RGA. So I knew what Chapin's job somewhat was on Twitter. So my first question to them was, great. Chapin is a lead copywriter for RGA. Who on your team of copywriters is going to lean in and work on Twitter? I'm not sure. And do we have a budget? I'm not sure. We go through a list of questions. And I think my point in having Chapin here, in addition to the fact that he's a brilliant tweeter, was to have him talk a little bit about his position, so that when you're in a meeting and someone says, I want what they have, you have a better understanding to be able to say, well, great. Do we have a budget? Who's the creative who's going to lead that? What's their time going to be like? And then for the ringer, my question always is, will this be on their evaluation at the end of the year? That's the longest pause. It has to be part of someone's job, not necessarily yours. But if you're assigned someone in the agency, ask, is this part of their job? Because then they'll really care, right? When they sit down with their boss and the boss says, you haven't tweeted in about a month. What's going on? So Chapin, if you wouldn't mind.
Sometimes you don't feel like tweeting. It's fine.
Though I will say it's very meta. I would be sitting at my desk and I'd look over and see Chapin just staring off into the distance. And for quite a moment, and then I suddenly see, and I look at my phone and there's a tweet from Chapin. And if you haven't seen his most recent one, it's very well suited to Q4 and Adland. So if you would talk a little bit about what you do, that'd be great.
Yeah, I mean, I think the important thing, and like what you were just saying, is the part about commitment. Like, I think it really does, no matter what the channel is, like whoever's managing that should love it, should like really have their head in it. And because it does, aside from like volume of posting, like you need to have your head in it a certain amount of time every day, just to like kind of absorb the rhythm of it and to know what people are talking about and what to stay away from, all that stuff. So that does require like time and just like a passion, a love for the platform. I will say, like, it wasn't always so at RGA that it wasn't an immediate thing of like, we are now empowering you to do. It was basically like the corp comms team, this is before you arrived there, was like, do you want to do this? Like, we don't want to deal with this and we don't know what to do with it. And like, you're a writer, and like, I was already posting for myself at that point a little bit. So it was like, take this, like, if you don't like it, fine, like we'll figure out something else. I kind of fitted in between, among my other responsibilities for like client stuff and everything. And that's still the case. It took a long time. After a while, finally, I was like, can I please have like a dedicated, like on my timesheets, like number of hours a week that I can put toward this? Cause it actually does. And it's like a fraction of what I actually do, like spend on it. But it took a little while, but I finally did get like, timesheet sort of approval to like, this is like a legitimate thing. And, and then it did, it took a while, but eventually it started as a thing where like, I was just kind of amusing myself and like kind of screwing around and like messing up, and like, no one was really looking at it. So it didn't matter. But then eventually, like, there was like a recruiting survey, and like people, and people said like the Twitter account was one of the reasons why people wanted to work at the agency, and like, or like CMO of a new client was like, yeah, I like considered you guys in the first place because of the Twitter account. So then, like, to be able to sort of point to things that had legitimate, value other than just me making myself laugh.
You've also hired people from Twitter. I mean, in terms of people who are tweeting well.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely like a recruiting tool. It's like, sometimes I think of myself as like a switchboard operator. Sometimes it's like people with like random requests trying to find the right person to talk about this thing or whatever. And like, when I try to help as much as I can. But we've definitely we found good people and hired people through Twitter. And
how do you work with the comms team? Because I know every once in a while you will see a tweet that you can tell there was probably a request from comms, and you found a good balance. How do you manage that?
Yeah, I mean, I think I communicate with them regularly, and you know, I fully, you know, it's not my personal account. Like it's the agency's thing, and it needs to do, you know, multiple jobs. And so, you know, people like give me, or can you, hey, can you, you know, retweet this, or can you post about this? And like, I always try and accommodate. I will say self-promotional stuff as a rule does poorly always. And so, but you know, whatever, that's fine. Like you do what you have to do. And there are instances where I will like gently sort of respectfully push back. Like, I just don't think this is a good idea. Like the thing, you're not going to get the reaction you want from this if we post this. So it's definitely, and they like, after all this time, like people you know, understand I know what I'm doing for the most part, and like there's a mutual respect. Like they have stuff they have to get done and stuff they have to get out, and I know the platform probably better than they do, and so there's a give and take there.
That's fair enough. And I think it's fair to say we've also had opportunities where press have reached out to talk to you either about what you're doing or to address crisis or something and to weigh in. So it's been nice. There's a bit of fame there attached to that, to the poor person who gets assigned to tweeting. You've done it more than most, but I think you've had any number of interviews talking about either what you're doing or how you're doing it.
Yes. Yeah.
Not every day.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's weird. It's funny. It's like, and this is like an age thing, like, you know, it comes in waves. So like, you know, people discovered the account, or like ages ago discovered the account, and like, oh, this is not like other accounts, like this is funny and weird, like I'm going to write about this guy. And there are a couple of articles, and then those people like graduate from the industry or like go on to do other things, and then like younger people come in and it starts out, they discover the account, it's like, oh, I'm going to write an article, but it's the same article, but and then, you know, 7 years pass, and then like there are a couple more articles, and it's like, yeah, anyway.
Do you have a tip or trick or a suggestion that you would make for our marvelous comms people? Because I'm biased.
I would say, I think my experience in the thing in RGA is I wouldn't recommend it as a model necessarily, because it was a bit of an accident. It happened when Twitter was very new and no one really knew what the hell it was or what to do with it. And so I wouldn't say like handing the keys over to one person and letting them do whatever they want, and like with no oversight and no review. I don't know that that's a thing that you want to replicate, but I will say I would keep it small, like, you know, give the keys to maybe not one person, but like a very small team of people you trust, who like know your agency, know your organization, and like they know the culture, they have some sense of what's appropriate and what's not. They have good taste. They love people who love the platform, whether it's, you know, TikTok or Twitter, and trust them, you know, like trust them until they give you a reason not to be trusted.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Judy, I'd like to move on to you. If you have not been on Judy's LinkedIn, please take some time. One of the reasons that I've enjoyed, well, many reasons I've enjoyed her LinkedIn, I walk away learning something. I have a better sense of what she's seeing going on in DEI. She brings a marvelous perspective, but she also brings herself. And I think sometimes we have execs who are very formal and would like to issue a statement via LinkedIn. That is changing, but I would encourage you to look at Judy's LinkedIn, because I think she's got a wonderful way of infusing herself, but also informing different audiences, either on a trend or something that she feels is important. One of my favorites is a series that she did about advice for her daughter. And that really intrigued me. So if you would talk a little bit about what you're doing on LinkedIn, but then delve into like what you did with your advice for your daughter, I think that'd be helpful.
So I think I'll start by saying, I'm so glad that the world has finally allowed us to be our authentic selves, because throughout my career, I've always fought against that. I had to fight against that, you know, being a certain way, not speaking the way others spoke, or not coming from the same school and went to CCNY and used to say it with I went to CCNY, you know, and now I can say I went to CCNY in Harlem. Yes, 138th Street. That's right. So I take my authentic voice on LinkedIn. It was not designed as purposeful. It was moved into the global head of culture role at WPP. And it was purposeful in that I wanted to give voice to WPP. I wanted to give voice to what we were doing. And then it's kind of evolved into giving voice to what I thought. And then it gave voice to, being myself. And it's interesting, as many things I post about, you know, what's happening in the industry. I'll post about, equal pay. I'll post about a number of things. But what gets the most response is when I post about something personal. I think my first personal post a few years ago was when I decided to take a sabbatical. Correct that. Didn't decide to, needed to, or I would die. And that was right after, 2020. And I posted about the lessons that I learned by taking time off from work, and also posted about the generosity of WPP to allow me to take 3 months and then say, I'm not ready yet. And the CEO saying, then take another 3. And I thought that was the best gift in the world. Allowed me to lose 70 pounds. Hey. But lessons to my daughter, as I was thinking about what my next stage would be in life, I started to think about what's the legacy that I want to leave and to whom? And the legacy I want to leave is to my daughter. And there's so many lessons we learn through work that affect our personal lives. I mean, life at work and our life in our day-to-day lives kind of blend, and certainly have blended over the last 2.5 years. So I often, and I think parents do, give your children advice. So I thought I would just record it in 1 minute or less segments. And they ranged from the first job I had at ABC TV, where I saw people around me getting promoted. And I'm from a Jamaican culture. Our culture is put your head down, do your job. One day somebody's going to discover you. And one day, again, being like 22 or so, I said to my boss, everybody around me is getting promoted. What am I doing wrong? And my boss said, you never asked. So my first lesson to my daughter was ask for what you want. And it became into a series of 3 months of lessons over time of some things. It's funny, some people at WPP, when I was doing this, said, wow, you're rather personal. You think that's okay? And I think it is. I think the world is ready for us to be ourselves. And I think that's what people want to hear. And as leaders, and by leaders, I mean anybody that's in any role, because we're all leaders. But everyone's voice matters. And it's such a gift when you give someone your gift of knowledge and what you've learned along the way. And you'd be surprised how much you trust people, how much you influence people. I've met so many people through doing my posts. I met a woman who was thinking about doing harm to herself, and as a result, took a sabbatical from her job. I met someone else who decided to get a divorce as a result of just taking time to put themselves first. So for me, it's about creating impact. That's what my life now is about. And I found LinkedIn to be my community because it's a community of business leaders. And I think it's a community that's willing to listen to things beyond how do I get a new job?
Tell us, did you have a massive creative team and
studio
sure. People for your
sure.
About your advice for your daughter?
Yeah,
right?
sure.
Everyone gets that. Sure.
Yeah, I had an iPhone. Someone told me to buy this $10 mic. No, just, on my own. And actually, I used my daughter's help, who's 20 years old. What you learn in school these days. So no massive team, just myself. And it's just worked. And now in starting my own business, a lot of people that that have followed my posts have said, oh, could you come talk? Could you consult on this? And it's funny how, they say, this is not what I meant, but the people you meet on the way up are the people you meet on the way down. But, the road that you build to get to wherever you're going, it's funny how that road comes back to you. And I've been so lucky that the people that I've met along the way, like you, Suzanne, who I've just met live for the first time.
For the first time, yeah.
You know, you've been there through trying to create We All Rise Together, which was a nonprofit I started with some others to address the impact of COVID on Black and Brown communities. But we often do things because we want to do good for others. But we'd be so surprised how much that good comes back to us. And I'm reaping that benefit now. And LinkedIn has been part of that journey.
That's awesome. I'll also point out, if you have time, go back into LinkedIn, because Kai has an interview with Judy that is amazing. And I would argue an excellent model to think about isms about your executives. Kai knows Judy so well. She picked up on some of the things she will say or do. And it gave me a good chance to think about who of my leaders have those personalities that shine, but give you a moment to kind of go, I see what you did there, and reinforce part of the culture that you guys are working to build.
I am not leaving the least for last.
I'm really not.
Lindsay, you when you and I talked 2 hours ago,
And you kindly agreed to step in. Thank you, Rebecca Sullivan, for the recommendation.
you had talked about you've had 2 experiences,
And I'll just caveat it by saying a lot of our conversation, I'm hoping, is helpful. But what's really cool about what Lindsay's going to talk about is she has big agency experience and more teams. You had a big team at DDB and then a smaller team at Gale. And I think it's helpful to understand what happens with TikTok at both levels. It's definitely a more challenging platform and one more thing on your plate for sure.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, my experience is quite varied in that, I worked for a 200-person agency in Australia, also DDB, then a 10,000-person network in my global role at DDB, where we launched the DDB TikTok about 2 years ago, and now at Gale, which we've launched a month ago. So please, be kind with the following count at this stage. But, we're a 700 people agency, which means very different staffing to what we had at DDB. But starting from that experience, we overhauled our entire social strategy when I started in the global team at DDB, and there was a real kind of overhaul of the team there. And part of our strategy was linked to our new brand ethos, which was unexpected works. And the conversations we had internally was, if we're going to go out and say we're the agency that delivers unexpected works, we also have to be unexpected ourselves. And I think this is one of the biggest ironies in our industry, that we don't practice what we preach for clients, and that we don't treat our own brand like we would a client brand. So I sat down, and I was in New York by now, but I sat down with my Australian head of social and said, okay, tell me, if we were to be unexpected, what we would look like. And of course, they sent me the bloody RGA page. And I was like, I'm never going to get that approved. Thanks. And of course, being a big global network, we weren't able to do some of the things that perhaps he came up with from Australia, where, in fairness, we get away with a little bit more being down under. But what he came up with was, okay, TikTok has just sort of emerged as a channel. This was about 2 years ago. So it was really starting to pick up pace. And of course, inspired by our lovely friends at Mischief, who I'm replacing today, we were thinking about what we can do, but what we can do that's right for us. And I think that's really important when you are looking at a TikTok strategy. No doubt we've all gotten a deck with RGA as a suggestion of what we should do on Twitter, and a deck with Mischief's TikTok link.
Like you're famous, Chapin. I don't
really
think you realize how many meetings you've come up
really
in.
annoyingly famous as well, I must say. But our TikTok strategy was very much driven by our social strategy connected to our comm strategy, which again, I think is really important. And I think strategy and TikTok can be a bit of a dirty word because my head of social said it should be fluid and free and, screw your strategy. And I said, yeah, that's never going to happen. But also what we found was when we started to open up our TikTok council, so him and I started filming content, him and I, only. If you scroll back to the page, it's mainly me, sadly. And I do believe that you have to be in the content yourself to ask others to get involved. So we started by him and I filming the content, and then built a TikTok council of 11 people, which I know is annoying to hear because we're all working with scrappier teams. But what I learned through that process was we couldn't have no strategy, because to bring other people into the council, we ended up having people from Sydney, North America, Brazil. We needed a framework. We needed at least some guardrails so people like me and the comms team could sleep at night, but also so I could send it to, Katie from the media team and say, hey, we would love a TikTok on this trend. And she could go, okay, what should this look like? What should this feel like? And what are the guardrails to make sure, no one gets in trouble? So we created this Teams channel of 12 of us, and the way that we've set it up, which I think is helpful for everyone in this room, is we would send inspiration daily and then commission it to one of the 11 people in the group to create it. They would then film their screen and send it in the group for review. It was a lean approval process, but I think it is important for the agency brands that we work for. And then at Gale, it's been a similar journey. It's been 1 month, but we've followed a similar strategy. However, I do not have 10,000 people anymore and a network of 149 offices. So for me, it was leaning into our social team and our creative team. And everyone in this room has the talent in their agencies to make it happen. I often say it from a comms perspective, we have the engine to be a full newsroom to develop our own content. We just don't use it effectively always, or tap into what is available. So that was what we started to do at Gale. And now I have a group of 5 people, which are creating content. I just approved something that, a junior person on my team has created that's duetting mischief. And actually Jameson appears because it's a little screenshot of his article because we were named US Agency of the Year shortlist today. There's my plug. Thank you.
Sorry, we have like 30 seconds
We
left. I do want to leave it open to one fast talking comms person, which is probably any of you. Any questions? A question before we go?
I have one. So, Chapin, are you worried about safe Twitter and what it will do to that?
I thought that question was coming.
So I'm just going to
The fact that I've hinged everything on this one platform and it's about to implode, what that means for my career and person. I don't think about that at all. No, please, come on. No, I mean, I think about it. I mean, but I think what can you do? I think I believe in people over platforms. Like I think, people, we're in a creative industry with lots of really interesting, ambitious, passionate people who will find, if Twitter goes away, I will say, I don't think there's it's not going away. I don't think anytime soon. I don't think there's any analog or great alternative right now anyway. But I think people will find a way, and, I don't think we need to worry too much.
Oh, David Ford, I can't resist. Meanwhile,
I think so Lindsay, for TikTok, since you guys just launched it a month or so ago, it sounds like, what are you guys using as metrics for success? Because I think that's something that we're looking at Ogilvy in terms of launching. So I'm just curious.
Yeah, so I think follow count is an obvious one, but reach is more impactful and showcases a broader audience. I think, the metrics take a little while to catch up. I think it took a year for DDB to see any real traction. Mischief perhaps is another story. But yeah, I think also anecdotally through, as you mentioned, the recruitment process, hearing from candidates that they found us there is another way that we are measuring that.
all right, before we get kicked off stage, thank you. You guys know how to find them on social. Please ask them questions here or on their platforms. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Please welcome Vonda LePage and Shannon Miller.
Hi. Everyone gets to watch me amble into a tall chair very nervously. Don't you feel lucky?
Me too. It's like stumbling up here. Am I on? Yeah.
So I'm super excited to be sitting here with Shannon, who I've gotten to know kind of well over the last, I don't know, 24 hours or so. Shannon is a hard woman to track down. I think anybody in this room that has tried to catch her attention, you must be getting zillions of emails a day. So when I first reached out to Shannon, it was a few days, I think, before you got promoted to your new title.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Adweek's managing editor, creativity, creator economy, and DEI. Mouthful.
That sounds right. I had to like track all the words. I'm like, yeah, they all seem like they were there. Yeah.
So you've been at Adweek now year and 9 or 10 months. I think we felt your influence since joining. And I am going to sort of address some of these questions around creativity, creator economy, and DEI, and figure out how we can help Shannon do her job, but also help us. So I'm going to start with the creator economy. I know what the creator economy is. We all do, but what does that mean? What are you looking for? Do you want, would you be interested in us providing people to spotlight creators or work or what? It's a big, massive area.
It's a really vast thing that it can get really hard to kind of solidify in a very neat soundbite because it is so new. It's very much like the metaverse, where everyone was like, metaverse, dope. What is that? And you can get a number of answers there. But with creator economy specifically, I'm coming from the perspective of someone who has a creator background. That's where I started. Previously, the relationship between the creator and advertising was very one-sided, where it was how the creator can service the brand, and that's where it ended. And now we're moving into a new phase where there's a realization that they can actually coexist and help each other in a way that benefits both. Because who knows better how to cultivate an audience than a creator, than a small-time creator that, you know, that was their only option. They didn't have the option of getting these very lovely, flashy jobs and very nice offices. They had to build something small and build it from the ground up. And that's, you know, direct knowledge that brands can benefit from. Mm-hmm. So creator economy is about really this coexisting nature of the creator and what we thought traditional advertising was, which is now really, really shifting. So in terms of how we can better tell those stories, I really, of course, I'm very interested in people first storytelling. That's where I got my start. That's just what I'm naturally good at. And I don't see myself drifting from that anytime soon. So of course, we want to be able to talk to creators, but I specifically want to talk to creators when they have something that they can teach marketers and they have something that they can teach advertisers, because there is this misconception that this, you know, little kid on TikTok doesn't have a ton of knowledge. They do. And there's something that we can all learn there. And I think Adweek is a really special position to be able to convey that information in a way that is comprehensive and that really gets down to like the foundation of that. So that's what I'm really interested in. Yes, I would love to spotlight people because I love that. But I definitely want to spotlight people who have really key insight to share that we can all learn from.
Terrific. Thank you. So focusing on creativity, tell me how to get coverage. Just tell me. You and I joke back and forth on this. Ryan Reynolds is not going to do an ad with me. I mean, he's just, no. He's not. So,
I mean, maybe he will, I don't know. I think one of the biggest misconceptions that we are dealing with is that you have to be a Ryan Reynolds or an Apple or a Microsoft to get coverage. And the reality of that is, of course, that, you know, that particular creative is going to be very attractive because I have a ton of resources. But what I think people don't realize is that we actually turn down more than we cover, because those particular sectors have a lot of output. They're very prolific. So what we get to cover may have caught our eye in a very specific way because it tells a very specific story. But we end up saying no to a lot because we learn about it day of. Because if we get down to the reality of it, it's not really telling a story. It's kind of serving a certain function, which is fine. But at the end of the day, I'm interested in the story behind the story. That's what makes advertising so fun, is that there's a lot of inherent power in what we all do. And being able to say, like, this piece of creative really helped tell a different side of this big city, or this specific creative connected this brand to an audience that they've had no access to, or have had really no idea how to reach. That's what I'm interested in. And that's the thing that's going to not only make sure that we've solidified that coverage, but more often than not, make sure that I cover it personally. I don't know how much value that has in this room, but I know that if it moves me to be able to write about it, then that's something that I know is going to interest my readers. One of the big things that I want to do with our section, and what I feel like we're doing a little bit of, but what we're going to be really robust about in 2023, is I want to make sure that the platform I have is a resource, that everybody has an opportunity to learn from that. And if there's a way that we can use creative to serve as a sort of bridge for marketers to understand creatives more, and for creatives to share how they're delivering what marketers need, then that's going to be a really great way for us to that's going to be a really great way in for us. So you don't need Ryan Reynolds in your ad. I actually would honestly prefer that you don't have Ryan Reynolds in your ad.
I'm getting a little tired.
I love him, but because there's only so much you can say about this big celebrity is doing this cool thing. It's really about telling the story, which is something that's accessible to brands big and small.
Great. Okay, so I'm getting nervous. We've got 3 minutes. 10 minutes is not enough. Okay, so this will just be a yes or no, because I'd like to spend more time on it, but I've got 4 other questions to ask you. So because I'm interested in this, would you be interested in agencies demonstrating the diversity of their teams and also sustainability? This comes out of Cannes and the changes they're making, so on and so forth. Is that something that would be of interest? I mean, I don't know how we some of it I know how to demonstrate, but.
I know you said yes or no. Yes, if you can be specific, if you can be honest, and if it's not a prop. The second that we see that it is sort of like a way to get a talking point and not a way to actually provide a platform to the people that we needed, I can't do anything with that. And so, yeah, I know we are very tired of the word authenticity, just because it's very vague. Yeah. But if you're using that as a prop or not, or if you're using that because it speaks to your brand's core. So if it speaks to your brand or agency's core, and it speaks to a culture, yes. If it's a thing to get snaps or a pat on the back, no. I would suggest moving to another platform.
Okay, so here's another quick question. Super Bowl, just tell us, who are we pitching to?
Me.
You?
With me, but also Jameson Fleming.
Okay.
Also.
Awesome.
So that I'm not taking the flood, but we actually have a really great staff. You don't really pitch to anyone on the staff, but when it comes to really figuring out how that coverage is going to be implemented, me and Jameson Fleming are the best to go to.
Great. So with a minute and something left, diversity, equality, and inclusion, which I probably should have started with. I was thinking about this after we kind of went back and forth on questions and what we wanted to talk about. When you look at the last year and a half of articles and stuff that you've done, has there been a piece that's really, you feel, moved the needle, made an impact, or maybe made an impact on you? What's the piece that you just love?
The piece that I really loved to do this year was about Derek Smith at the Martin Agency, just because it gets to the heart of what I love most. Is it wasn't about creative per se, although he did a really great job with DoorDash's campaign. But behind that, it was a story about his really unconventional way into advertising and how that served as an opportunity for him to be a director for the first time. And that's huge for someone who is a Black man or is a Black man and was a college athlete who didn't get the opportunity to do like the traditional ad school and, you know, be a part of like the big holding company. He was an athlete that had a plan. It didn't pan out. And then he saw advertising as a way to elevate his creativity in a way that he didn't realize was available to him.
Yeah.
And because we got to tell that story, I've gotten a lot of feedback from people who've taken that to high schools and colleges and taking that to people who didn't realize that this was a viable industry for them. And that's a huge DEI win, because I don't think that a lot of people in marginalized communities who are young realize that this is a great way for them to break into something creatively and spread their wings. So that was a really special story to me. And I really want to tell more stories like that. So if you have somebody special in your agency who is doing great work in that sense and is opening up something new for our audience, we would really love to tell that.
Okay, that's amazing. So I'm out of time and I have all these other questions. So I'm going to plug for Shannon all the podcasts that she does. And it's kind of crazy. I don't know how much time you must spend on that, but of course there's, that's probably an ad, and Off Madison, which I recently started listening to and am inspired by and love the talent that you're like talking to and stuff. So thank you
I really
for
appreciate
that.
Thank you.
And I think you'll be here with us for a portion of the day. So
yes, I'm here all day.
Shannon.
And I'm super approachable. So say hi.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Please welcome Brett Lofgren.
Hello. Thank you for having me here today. My name is Brett Lofgren. I'm the president of a company called NewsWhip. We are a real-time media monitoring technology company. Today, I get to share two really cool stories with you. But before we do that, just a little bit of background about who we are as a business, provide some context. We track stories when they're published across web and social within seconds of being published. We look at the engagements with each story. That gives us a sense about how audiences feel about topics. If a crisis is going to be an issue. And I think for communication professionals, understanding the impact of stories in advance is super important. The underlying ingredient for all this, and the GIF isn't building up to the right there, so you have to visually see it, is we can predict the impact of a story. We can predict how many people are going to engage with this story, hours ahead. So I think when you're guiding clients on, is this a topic we should participate in? Does it have legs? Will it continue? Is this a reputational risk to the company? And I think that's really one of the underlying ingredients, is being able to predict the impact of a news cycle, the impact of a story within seconds of it being published. So the first story I'm going to share with you is about a brand coming to the hero status during a Texas storm. Ford Motor Company has been a customer of ours and the team at Ford and their agencies for quite some time. They primarily use real-time data for media relations and really define opportunities that are out there. What's happening across, how can we insert our brand within this conversation? Last February, for those that remember, Texas had one of the worst storms in history. 80% of the homes lost power. There were shortages of water, supplies. It was a complete disaster. Texas wasn't ready for this type of storm. The insights team at Ford and the customers that we're working with there do a really good job of monitoring local content. Local content, in the state of Texas is obviously very important for a company like Ford. They have a lot of customers there. So what was interesting is as this storm happened, obviously they have their F-150s, they're running supplies around the state. They noticed that a lot of these local forums, the F-150s had a different purpose. The F-150s have a feature in the back of the truck. It's called a power boost. It's basically a generator in the back of the truck. And people were using them to help their neighbors plug in cook stoves and supply electricity. And for Ford, this is a home run story. It's like, wow, like look at what we're doing locally. Let's really monitor this and see what the impacts are. And from Ford's perspective, they wanted to see, is this going to become a bigger thing, right? Should we get our resources behind this? And Ford's really smart, and their agencies are really smart the way they use their data, because they want to get alerted when there's going to be a big thing. So they received these alerts, and the alerts basically said, this is going to become a national news story. And for the team at Ford, this was enough data for them to mobilize, for them to go to their agencies, go to all their partners, the content teams, the communications teams, and say, we need to get behind this in a big way. So obviously earned media right away is the first thing you think about, and all the other campaigns they could promote. Well, they wanted to go a step further. And I thought this was a brilliant idea. So they started calling and mobilizing all the local dealerships. And with these dealerships, they're basically saying, hey, we need your help. Loan out your trucks to the community. And this is hard to mobilize in the amount of hours, right? In 12, 24 hours. But I think for Ford, they had the data that basically said, this is going to be a big thing. Look at what the impacts are in the community. We need to be the hero. They got a ton of coverage. The Detroit Free Press picked it up, get millions of engagements on the story. Their comms team and agency teams really pushed this out there. But really at the end of the day, it was a reputational thing. Ford was one of the companies that was recognized that stepped up in Texas during the winter storm. And we're all in business to be in business. And clearly they were selling a lot of trucks. And the feature, of the power boost in the back, of the Ford, that wasn't something they were really marketing at the time. It was more of an afterthought. But the promotion and the impact it had on the Texas storm really became a national news story. The last story I'm going to share with you really is about how a brand was forced to adapt and innovate during a critical moment. Marriott. Marriott, we work with their MLive, it's their command centers, their newsroom, it's their content team. We've been supporting them with real-time data, for about 4 or 5 years. And the data is used to really inform content creation, to inform campaigns, to inform ideas across, all the different creative sides, the communication sides. If you look back and you think of, oh, geez, COVID-19, what industries were impacted right away? Airline industry and the hotel industry. So as all this content's being flooded across about lockdowns and everything else, all the halted being, from a travel perspective, Marriott was forced to close, a lot of their hotels temporarily. The MLive team, this is where they really rose. And for them, they're trying to figure out, okay, our business is being impacted in a negative way. What can we do? Like, what do we say at a time like this? Because they're worried about it. Their layoffs, staff, there's so many different concerns there. So they were monitoring all these trends, all the real-time trends, trying to cut through the noise. And as weeks turned into months, they started to really get a sense of the travel industry. People are talking more about the travel industry than they are the business industry, because people just want to get out and get back to the way of life. And what they started to notice here is there is a ton of interest in people wanting to combine vacation and work. And that was the immediate need after 3-4 months of this. And the term leisure ended up being one of the top terms that came out. I'd never heard of it before until we had this conversation with them, but it was really predicting to dominate the news cycle, leisure. And they said, you know what, we have to go into action. Right? What can we do right now where our business is impacted? We have to respond to what's happening in the market. And they launched their work from anywhere program. You can read on the right there is not welcome to your new out of office, but welcome to your office. A day pass, a stay pass, and this kind of play pass that combined, business and travel. For Marriott, it really was a win. It was, they used this data to find a nugget of an opportunity during a horrible time for their business. Again, they did a lot of initiatives here. They launched the Apartments by Marriott. They did have an increase in their loyalty memberships during this time, which is kind of strange given the lack of travel. And then also they launched a lot of all-inclusive resorts that made it easier for people to combine work as well as travel. So I wanted to share these two stories with you because I think they're pretty compelling about using data for your clients to guide your clients about real-time insights and opportunities. And I think there's just three takeaways here that I wanted to share. And it's being able to perceive the situation. Like Ford, to be able to see that early enabled them to mobilize, enabled them to convince the head of communications, say, hey, we need your resources. Being able to predict its impact, to be able to predict, hey, look at these top 100 stories about the winter storm in Ford, where they're going in the next 24 hours. So I think for Michael Young and the insights team at Ford, that was the key ingredient, was they had the data, then persuade, the stakeholders to take action. And for Marriott, it was really about what can we do? Like, what can we do during this time period? What initiatives can we launch? What content can we create? And it really was about just following the trends and getting ahead of the trends around travel and the combination of travel and work remotely. So that's all the stories I wanted to share with you today. I wanted to leave it open for a couple of seconds to see if anyone had any questions. Cool. Well, if anyone does, please feel free to follow up with me. There's my email address there. We have a lot of great stories about this. I'm sure some folks here have worked with us on them directly or indirectly. So, all right. $20 right there. Thanks. Thank you.
Please welcome Rebecca Sullivan and Colin Brown.
We have props. So I just wanted to take a moment to introduce someone I met today that I worked with for the past 2 years at Mullen Lowe. He was in the New York office. I was in Boston.
Yes.
And we just met today for the first time, and he was my best friend at Mullen. I think.
You're my best friend too, Rebecca.
Thank you. And so if you've heard of Tropicana toothpaste or orange juice cereal,
yep,
that Colin's responsible for that, and some award-winning Super Bowl spots.
Yes. So I'm pleased to introduce, and many of you already know, Rebecca Sullivan, who's our Director of Public Relations at Wunderman Thompson and is a real pro in agency comms, has been doing it probably more years than she would like to say, but has worked on Super Bowl for many years as well, doing terrific work. And with our first prop as an example of Rebecca's long history in Super Bowl.
Since I had to send, we used to have to send 3/4-inch tapes FedExed to Ad Age and get yelled at by Bob Garfield if we didn't agree to send that in advance. And and our executives would be scared. So anyway, so a lot has changed. So the big thing is, you never used to have, obviously, the internet to give us a 30-day in advance Super Bowl season. It's not just one day or the day after anymore. It's much longer. And I think even though a lot of us are seasoned and sort of know what to do, the questions come up every year, sort of like, do we release the spot the day of? Let everybody see it at the same time? Do we give it 30 days in advance? Do we go through every iteration of, we're in the Super Bowl, here's a teaser, here's the other activations we're doing, whatever. And then the whole thing is it's a risk. It's a big decision because Tuesday it's over. Like it's over. Mondays they're doing the wrap ups, and then Tuesday it's over. So it's important to really know what to do. So Colin, my question to you. Pre-release or in-game surprise?
So yes. So I think most of our clients, our ECDs, are asking the same exact question and putting on pressure on us to come with a perspective to either pre-release the full spot before the big game or to do a real-time release. So I think there are two schools of thought. So the advantage to not releasing is really that you're going to have a really special moment during the Super Bowl, that everybody is tuning in for the big game. It's the one, probably realistically one moment in the year where consumers are really hyper focused on engaging with advertising. Most people are coming to watch a series of commercials that happen to be playing in between a football game. So it's about really showcasing our work and providing a really, fresh new opportunity to have your brand be releasing its work in real time in the Super Bowl. It means that it also doesn't feel outdated. It's going to feel really fresh if you debut it during the Super Bowl. And then there's going to be less risk of negative critique leading up to it. I think we all know as communications professionals that not all chatter is good chatter, that, like I said, it's the one time in the year where consumers are hyper focused on our industry and reviewing us. And if you're releasing a week, 2 weeks in advance, you're opening yourselves up to a longer dialogue of either hyper positive or in some cases negative conversation around your brand and the work. But this also comes with a lot of advantages of why to pre-release. So I'm, normally team pre-release, I'll just say that, but I think it's also a decision that you have to make for your individual client and brand, and really to make the decision, think about what is the story that we're looking to tell, what is our narrative, and what is our category? How easy of a get is it for consumers? Because like I mentioned, consumers are turning to advertising largely for the first time for the year to really be focused on reviewing our work. And it's not an easy get for everybody. The message that Lay's or Toyota might be sharing might be an easier get than a startup or an emerging tech or financial services brand. So the pros obviously to pre-releasing are you're going to have a longer window to really tell a compelling narrative. So that's my favorite part as being a storyteller, is really having that week or two in advance to really shape the story. Because I think we all know that 30 or 60-second spot, while it's so expensive to buy it, it's not your entire story. There's not always a clear why the brand is releasing that message. And so you can use a pre-release and those pre-storytelling moments to really shape a narrative around a bigger story about why your brand has entered the Super Bowl and what your offerings are for consumers.
That's right. And, Colin, I should say, he represents brands, and I obviously represent the agency, and we have different constituents, if you will.
Yep.
But I do think what you just said is a really great argument for releasing early. And then you had an interesting take on teaser or no teaser.
Yes. So I think another tool in your arsenal is, aside from releasing the full work, is brands are doing some really innovative work around the teaser. So are you creating a video stills that are just a snapshot of your actual in-game spot, or are you creating some other kind of work that's going to be just as compelling to tell that narrative? So a few interesting stats that we actually have. So speaking of pre-releasing, so the industry is pretty much split. So last year, or this past year in 2022, half the brands in the USA Today top 10 ad meter pre-released their spots. In 2021, 4 out of the top 10 brands pre-released. And in 2020, 7 out of the top 10 brands pre-released. But in terms of teasers, not this past year, 9 out of 10 brands in the top 10 had some form of video component as a teaser. So while the industry is largely split over whether you should pre-release all of your hard work in advance of Super Bowl Sunday, it's really seems to be the majority opinion that you should have some kind of teaser component, whether that be a separate video asset or just really creative owned work on social or even paid social to tell that narrative.
And you had a good point about a teaser is when you create it, that's another expense. It's if you create a special one.
Yeah. So as storytellers, I think we all love to have as many tools in our arsenal as possible to tell a story, but our brands, our clients, our CMOs are thinking that tools have budgets and costs attached to them. So what can you do to to tease and create early chatter about your brand spot with minimal costs? Is there just a creative, organic social play that's not going to make you need to spend an entire extra day on set with additional talent costs and everything that we know goes into creating even a 15-second video teaser?
Great. So, I'm going to talk a little bit about some journalist anecdotes. I sort of talked to some of our friends at Ad Age and Wall Street Journal, the people that we've worked with for many years in getting Super Bowl ad coverage, and just to kind of get their opinion. And obviously, somebody said, you're stupid not to release it early. But, somebody said to me, well, obviously the publications want it early because they want to get it early. But there were just some different advantages that were sort of brought to me that I thought were sort of interesting if we're talking to clients. To Colin's point, it gives you time to give context behind your story. It might not just be, it might be a new product or an audience you're trying to reach that there needs to be further context on. It could be like a sustainability or purpose message that there could be more information on that the person just might not get in 60 seconds or 30 seconds of the Super Bowl. The other thing is just if this was the most sort of moving thing for me is that if a journalist doesn't have the information in advance, they're going to write a quick story. And if they don't have time to spend on it, it's not going to be as good. So I think that there's a great way to balance sort of the brand's needs of what they're trying to do and reaching the consumer, and then sort of who we're trying to reach as agencies.
And we all know that when we return from the winter break, we're going to start to see brands announcing, if we haven't already, announcing their return or their presence at the Super Bowl. So is your brand going to be one of the first ones out that's then mentioned every time as like one of the existing brands that has decided to return to the Super Bowl? Or are you going to be one of the last players to come out of the gate and maybe miss a few weeks of conversation when you could have been getting those additional mentions outside of just your feature story about returning?
It's true. And one thing, just so you guys know, I was doing some other research for this, and USA Today Ad Meter is already up. So it gives all the information on what you need to provide and all these different guidelines, which I thought was kind of interesting. Yeah, love it. Don't you love that?
So Rebecca, in terms of your audience and what really is the holy grail in terms of opportunities for a brand?
I mean, for an agency brand, I think we want, a great Wall Street Journal story, a great Ad Age, Ad Week story. And then it would, I think a morning show is great, but I feel like the ad meter is something that we all sort of want, our creatives want.
Is that really the hero for you, ad meter?
I don't know if it's a hero. I think it's more that that clients are going to maybe see what, our work like in the trades, and we love Ad Week a lot. So I was going to also talk about what do you do if you don't have a Super Bowl ad? Because before I worked with Wunderman Thompson, I worked with a lot of small and independent media and mid-sized agencies, and I got great PR for my executives with no Super Bowl ad. A couple ways to do it. If you're regional, like you're Minneapolis, Boston, wherever, you can go to your local TV station. We have New England Cable News, and they would have our executive on Friday before the Super Bowl with previews, which is easy to do research on because a lot of people pre-release could talk about the themes, things like that. And then after, you could kind of go in and review. You can do that with, I know our local newspapers aren't as, as great as they used to be, unfortunately. But if they, there are some reporters that will still cover in certain cities, sort of like the Super Bowl previews. One thing that we had at Mullen a few years ago was Sam Adams, which is a local brand. It was Goodby, right? Mm-hmm. They did ad with the Clydesdales, and it was only regional. Yeah. And they were able to get tons and tons of national press. And that's the other thing. So even if you have a funny regional ad that's running, you might be able to get national coverage for it. Just not on Ad Meter, I found out. So the other thing is, just think about pitch angles. Like you could write a byline. You don't have to have ever done a Super Bowl ad and write a byline about the Super Bowl advertising or predictions. What makes a good ad? You could say, do we even watch the Super Bowl anymore? So there's all sorts of stuff.
I think there's something interesting in if your brands don't have a spot in the game is to really serve or position your ECDs, your managing directors as third-party experts about advertising during this hot moment. I think when your brand does have a spot in the Super Bowl, you're so hyper focused on telling the story of the creative of the spot itself. But at least from my perspective on the PR side, I think sometimes what media also crave besides just the work is the kind of like big picture overview of what is the larger red line connective thread throughout all of Super Bowl storytelling, where you can really start to be a subject matter expert on what do all of these spots have in common? What are some common challenges that brands had to even get work to the Super Bowl this year, as we think through like the challenges that existed just to even get spots created for the 2021 Super Bowl in the midst of a global pandemic. So positioning your executives as kind of that overarching expert on our industry during such a hot moment is a vital opportunity, even when your ECD might be turning to you and saying, well, we don't have a spot this year. Our clients, don't see the value in the Super Bowl anymore. We're too new and innovative doing this old tactic of Super Bowl advertising, but they might really like it once they have a feature in Ad Week about what the connective thread is between all the work.
Yeah, they will. And they'll forget all about that. You got them that opportunity. So
you're not bitter at all.
Not bitter at all. I've launched many a career. So I wonder what the theme will be for this year's Super Bowl.
I think it's interesting. I think so. I just spoke about 2021 a little bit about, I think there was the obvious narrative about how are we even going to get spots produced in the midst of a global pandemic. I think a lot of CMOs and agencies were hyper fixated on inclusive storytelling and really highlighting BIPOC talent in front of and behind the camera. I continue to hope that that's going to be an ongoing importance and not just a trend. For 2022, we saw a lot of comedic storytelling where we were in the middle of an election year. It felt like the world just needed to laugh during a fun Sunday when everyone's insert props, just drinking, having Doritos and having a good time. Ultimately, it's not that serious. So last year to me was more about creative comedic storytelling. We obviously saw a lot of celebrities that are continuing to put a spotlight on the Super Bowl as much as we are. So for 2023, I think, there's a more positive outlook on it, that we really have this story of return to normalcy, of we're really back in the world, back to in-person experiences, and are moving outside of the global pandemic. But then I think there's also going to be an interesting shift happening where many think we're entering a recession. Last year, we saw a lot of first of their kind tech brands entering the Super Bowl, but we're now, sadly seeing many tech brands announcing layoffs, smaller marketing budgets. Are these smaller emerging brands going to have the same budgets that they did last year during a better year to participate in the Super Bowl? Or will we see this shift back to some of the larger players that have really always been kind of the main characters in the Super Bowl? So I think that'll be interesting to really see how it plays out. How do some of these newer brands that were really kind of owning the Super Bowl last year, like a Coinbase, who was last ranked on the ad meter with their QR code floating around, which was viewed as like the worst performing ad on the USA Today ad meter, but actually generated some of the most chatter out of all spots just because of how creative and different it was, and ultimately crashing their site. So I think it's going to be interesting to see who really the big players are.
And also another thing, just to plug the marketing arm, my friend Roy Elbo's client, they did a survey on the Super Bowl, and obviously celebrities are big, but music is always really big, like the kind of iconic songs that we hear. So we have 2 minutes and 52 seconds if anyone has questions, and then afterwards we're going to have a break, and then somebody's going to win these Doritos.
We have a Corona and 2 bags of Doritos for anyone who has a question.
And a Coke, because that's a WPP brand.
Any questions?
Always be plugging, always be plugging.
Always be plugging. Yes, exactly. So any questions? Callie?
Have someone who did their first Super Bowl spot last year. I think it's interesting from a PR and comm side, sometimes how you advocate for your role in being involved with the Super Bowl spot and getting to go to the shoot and be there and see the side stories. People are so busy doing the work of getting the spot that they actually miss some of the amazing stories that are happening in the moment. So for y'all and really, talking with clients, how are you kind of advocating for that PR presence in the moments that really matter, so you're finding as many stories as possible to tell?
Sure.
Yeah, I think you could answer that, and also just how to balance it with the client.
For sure. So I work on the consumer side. So I'm really working with the clients on a day-to-day basis, or come in from a project-based perspective to have a relationship with the clients. I would say my advice is the marketing team needs, their job is to be hyper focused on creating this 30 to 60 second spot that's going to be the star of the show. But PR's value as storytellers can go in and tell the marketing team, where are the other kind of hidden stories and the hidden treasures that are really going to make something special and rich, because you're going to have 65 other brands that are also creating 30 to 60 second spots that are going to be heavily produced with big budgets, with big celebrity names. But you need a practiced storyteller, a publicist, to go behind the scenes to really get into the work and uncover what are some additional narratives that you could tell to make sure that your work is standing out, not just as a brand during the Super Bowl, but really amongst your competitors as well.
Yeah. I hope to get to go on a shoot this year. Yeah. So thank you, everyone. I will just say we're going to have a 15-minute break, and we'll be coming back at 4:05, and enjoy your break. And who wants the Doritos?
Yes. Thank you, everyone.
Okay. It's easier to get people to right?
Please take your seats. The program will begin shortly. Please take your seats. The program will begin shortly. Please take your seats. The program will begin shortly. Please take your seats. The program will begin shortly.
I am like so petrified to sit in these. Oh my God, these are. Which one are you gonna sit in? My bad choice of dress today. Talk to Katie and Patrick. We also talk to Matt.
When I'm meant to be like sleeping and cocaine. So let's at least agree to go our separate ways. Not gonna judge you when you're real. Somebody else, long as you swear. You won't be pissed when I do it myself. Let's pretend it like we should and say we're good. No need to hide it. Come get what you want. This won't be a burden if we both don't hold the grudge. I think it's pretty plain and simple. We gave it all we could.
Please take your seats. The program is about to begin.
When I'm meant to be like sleeping and cocaine. So let's at least agree to go our separate ways. Not gonna judge you when you're real. Somebody else, long as you swear. You won't be pissed when I do it myself. Let's pretend it like we should and say we're good. Now you're holding this against me like I knew you would.
All right, here we go. Please welcome Tony Lee and Megan Graham.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back. Thank you all for being here. And hello to everybody out there who, some of you who've sent me notes and have made me even more nervous. I'm Tony Lee. I have my own PR agency. And with me is Megan Graham, who is how do you explain what you are?
I say I'm a reporter for CMO Today, covering advertising and marketing.
And CMO Today is a newsletter within the Wall Street Journal that covers all things advertising, marketing for the CMO audience.
Yeah, so the journal has a bunch of different pro verticals for different industries, and ours is for marketing, the marketing audience, and sort of our primary audience the way we think of it is CMOs.
So can you break down what you're interested in covering at CMO versus the other reporters who are also part of that newsletter, which is Patrick Coffey, Katie Dayton, and Nat Ives, and maybe one or two others?
That's it right now.
Okay.
But we do have, the journal has the media and marketing team also, which is outside of us. So you guys probably have worked with Suzanne, Vernica, and Patience Hagen, and they also cover a lot of the same stuff that we do, usually from like a little bit of a different tack. Like I would say a lot of what we write has a bit of like an instructive or like helpful spin for our audience. So it might be, what marketers should know about, Google's latest results or this or that or whatever, and kind of give a little bit of advice or here's how to approach something. Whereas theirs is a little bit more like general corporate news. And then within CMO, Nat is our editor. So he does write the newsletter. He's not typically writing. You'll see him write something every once in a while. But he's not generally writing. I would say Patrick and I are mostly covering like advertising. It can be it's hard because we do so much, like there's such a big breadth of it. And we're kind of just pitching things that we find interesting. And so there's things that either he or I would do. Katie's doing more design, customer experience-y stuff. I always just tell people like, go look at the last 10 stories. It's like weird and fun stuff. She's always doing something cool. So anytime a brand is doing something that's maybe not quite marketing, but could fit into that, she's very interested in that.
So when we look at you and Patrick, is there one of you that's more interested in, say, what's happening on the media side, or one more interested in the agency side? Or
so my definition is that I cover the agency side. So I cover some of the, I cover agency holding company earnings. And I just wrote a story a couple weeks ago about kind of their like street performance in recent years and things like that. But I wouldn't say like, if he had an idea, like he could do it too. I'm really not territorial. Like I should maybe we just, we're kind of both like, oh, this is cool. Or we've written things together. So it's just kind of, if someone went to him versus me with something, I'm not going to like never speak to you again. Like it'll be fine.
So what is the best way to contact you? What do you like and what do you hate?
Okay. I prefer email. It's just the easiest. It's the easiest way. I get a lot of texts and I get a lot of phone calls and stuff. And it just makes it's hard for me to keep organized when it's coming from different places. I don't like DMs or anything like that. I say email, and then it's also hard because people are like, well, you never answer my email. And I'm like, well, I'm sorry. But it's hard. We just get so many, and I know you guys know that, and everyone gets a lot of email, but I do prefer that. I scan them as they come in. I can't answer all of them, but if it is something that's like really major, just like say like something in the subject line, like this is big or something like that. Like, please read this email. And I'll be like, oh, okay, I'll read it. I promise I'll read it, but I might not be able to, I just can't give thoughtful reasoned explanations every time why we can't. It might just be that we have a crazy week. It might just be that it's just not interesting to us. There's just so few things that really are so crucial for us to cover that it's hard to like break through to that.
So from a breaking news perspective, if there's something big that's breaking, what's the best way to do it? And if it's more longer term, like tell me about how you can, what's your ideal pitch from us?
Yeah. So I always tell people, even if you don't have all the details straightened out, like as soon as you know something is coming, just be like, hey, I'm going to have something in 3 weeks. And I just want to see if it's something that you might be interested in. Can I get it kind of at the top of your radar? And I'll be like, yes. And I'll take a look and whatever details, and I'll tell you. We just need so much more time. And I was telling you, Tony, like earlier today, like I've worked at other publications where I could turn around a story in 30 minutes and it was like nothing. Now our process is so exhaustive, and it takes, multiple rounds of edits, fact checking. It's very, very belabored in terms of how much time it takes. So basically very rarely, unless it is massive, massive news, are we ever going to do something like that day or next day, because it just takes too long to do it the right way. And I also like to say that any journal story is going to be, we want additional context. We want to talk to outside analysts. We want to talk to, I want to get industry research. Like, I don't want it to be just sort of a straightforward one company news story. We want it to be deeper because our readers who are not in marketing want to learn something.
So what is the best way to help you? I have an expert on retail media. I have an expert on, programmatic, or I have an expert on a variety of topics. What's the best way to work with you on that?
Yeah, I think it's helpful to remind us which people you're working with and who their clients are. And there's going to be a lot of instances where, this happens every week or 2 weeks where I'm like, okay, I've got this great story and I just need a couple brands to get on the phone. And it can be really difficult. And you guys probably know that, trying to get clients to go on the record about things. But that's when it becomes I really rely on people. I've asked, many people in this room, do you guys have a good client that would talk about this? That's so helpful. So making it clear who you guys are working with, what they're doing. If you have experts, I every once in a while, just be like, hey, just a reminder, this is going on. If you ever need somebody to call, I have these 5 people that are awesome. And just remind me of that. That's helpful.
But you want to go beyond the agency. You want the agency's clients to be talking. Tell me a little bit about what.
Yeah. So I was talking to Patrick this afternoon, and he had done a recent story about luxury marketing. And the sort of hypothesis was, there's sort of a downturn, but we think luxury marketers are still spending. And he had just happened to get an email from, I wish I could remember if it was someone here, and I can't remember. I'm really sorry. They had recently sent to me and said, listen, we work with these 10 clients and 2 of them were luxury. And he was like, hey, do you think they'd want to talk? And they were like, yeah, get them on the phone tomorrow. And so that he was like, that was so helpful. And that really, made the story a lot better. And it was just, that's a great position for people to be in with us.
So that's kind of like a trend story, right? Are you looking at trend stories? Are you looking at do you want us to send you our Gen Z studies? Or
that was the example I told her of. I get 50 a week Gen Z stories or studies. And I'm like, don't send it to me. Just kidding. No, you can send it. Just don't remind me of it 10 times. Yes, the trend stories. I mean, much of what we're doing is that we want to, I try to, for the journal, our audience is not going to really necessarily care all the time what one brand is doing unless it's super, super, super interesting. So we really like to have a few examples of something that's a little bit more broader and kind of tells more of a story of what's happening in the industry. So yeah, you can kind of say, and you could just say we've got these kind of interesting things going on. If this is a thread for something that you're working on, just keep this in mind, and I do read those things and I will remember them. I promise.
Okay. So Shannon Washington is here and she talked about creative. Miller, I'm sorry. So talk to me about creative ideas and creative work. Are you going to be looking at that beyond Super Bowl? Because I know Super Bowl is.
We do care. Yeah, we do care about the Super Bowl, obviously. Yes, we are actually taking a more of a look at that than we have been in the past couple years. It has to be something that is, I gave you the example. There was a Carhartt campaign last year, and they were really trying to get people to go into manufacturing jobs. And that was just something that fits into the economy and what's going on with. So that's kind of the perfect campaign story where it fits into macroeconomic trends. It tells something that's deeper than just this ad's really cute. We get ads where I'm like, oh, this is really fun, but it just isn't something that has much of a deeper business story. The other thing I'll say is, actually putting together the ad. So is there something interesting about the creative process? Just keep us in mind, I'm trying to think of an example. Alex did a really good story during COVID about how agencies were putting their family members in ads. And that was something where it was just like one person had done it. And then she started asking around and all these other people had done it too. And that was just a fun story that the readers like loved it. So.
Great. That's it. We're done.
Wow.
0 time.
Please welcome Phyllis
Thank you.
McKenzie.
I think you can just leave that.
Oh, yeah. Hey, everybody. Now we have a tight 25 minutes and we have amazing people to get to. So, and I love these chairs. I feel like Ryan Coogler or somebody up here, like a major director. You know, I'm very impressed, or Spike Lee or somebody. But anyway, it's a pleasure for me to be here. I'll just very briefly introduce myself, and even though it's all there for you guys to take a look at. My name is Phil McKenzie. I'm a cultural anthropologist and strategist, and I'm also the host of not one, but 2 podcasts. One of those is called The Pool, which I do with Media Village, and the other one is called The Deep Dive, which actually has celebrated its 3-year anniversary just this month. So November's been a big month for me. So I want to give each of our panelists an opportunity to just briefly introduce themselves, their name and their title. Then we're going to get right into the questions. All right. So we'll start at my immediate right. Okay.
Hi, everybody. I'm Carter Brokaw. I am the president of digital revenue strategy for iHeartMedia. We are a massive audio company in the United States, the largest one, and that sort of spans broadcast radio, podcasting, and streaming. And most of the conversation today will be around podcasting.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ayana Angel, and I own a podcasting production company. I started off as a podcaster, but now I primarily work with companies and corporations to execute production on their podcasts.
Hey everyone, I'm Steve Abraham. I'm president of Oxford Road, which is an LA-based media agency specialized in audio. And yeah, we're not quite as big as this guy in radio, but we're nicely created, and we work with a whole bunch of different verticals.
Awesome. So my first question is obviously podcasting. You can't go too far without hearing the word. It's mentioned not only in the space of podcasting, but also in popular culture. So Steve, I'm going to start all the way at this end, right? Despite the fact that podcasting is both general and niche, what are some key components that allow you to exist in that gray area between being very pop culture and broad, but also finding specific audience?
Well, I mean, I think podcast has democratized the opportunity for everybody to really sort of start getting a voice out there. I know some of your questions are going to talk to this in a moment, but what we find is clients are obviously still quite nervous about going into podcasts to a degree, and this is attributed to some of the issues that are taking place with measurement. But those that are brave enough find opportunities to reach audiences that are very, very difficult to find elsewhere. I think the audience in podcast is primarily intellectually affluent. And what I mean by that is it's not just a discriminating point with regards to how much somebody earns, but folks that are really interested and listening. You can really find small niche audiences in pockets that are very difficult to find elsewhere, and reach them with really thoughtful messaging approaches, which I know we'll cover on other questions.
Yeah, and I want to give you a chance to jump in there as well, because you were telling us a little bit before we got on stage about your experience building your podcast, your show, and kind of finding, your way through that general and niche.
Yeah, so I started off podcasting as a result of a career transition. My original podcast that I started with was called Switch, Pivot, or Quit, because I used to do sports entertainment PR at the National Basketball Association, and I completely flipped my whole life around. I quit the job. Everybody was like, you are like insane. What are you doing? What are you going to do? I ended up getting a traditional book publishing deal, published the book. And then when I was on my book tour, so many people were like impressed by my story. And I started to realize it was because people hated their jobs. They did not, and they were like, okay, how did she do this? And so I wanted to create conversations on the Switch, Pivot, or Quit podcast that I felt would have served me when I was trying to figure out what was next for me. And that started to really resonate with people because they wanted guidance, they wanted insight, they also wanted to feel like they weren't alone. And I got a lot of feedback very quickly on people just saying, hey, thank you, this has done wonders for me. I'm the type of person where if everybody else is doing it, I tend to run away from it. I'm not going to do that with podcasting, but I started doing like text messaging with my listeners, and I stopped doing it because other people started doing it. But I recently picked it back up, and someone still today texted me and said, you know, your podcast helped me to quit my job, switch my career. I love what I'm doing now. Thank you so much for the guidance that your podcast gave. So these are people who felt like they weren't being seen, but I was able to create a space for them in a very honest space. And it just really took.
Now, Carter, I want to give you a chance to go in a slightly different direction here, because clearly, you know, the world of podcast and audio is huge. And how are you finding the types of shows that you want to get behind, and also making that connection between the creator and then the advertiser? You know, because I think that's the secret sauce that people are really trying to get at.
Yeah, I mean, we made a concerted effort in sort of the beginning of podcasting when we acquired a company, How Stuff Works. We made a concerted effort really to commit to all the different genres and the sort of the Apple podcast listing. I think there's 19 of them. And so today we have over 80 podcasts that have over 1 million downloads each. And it's given us really a diversity of content that we really want to sort of continue to sort of commit to. And then we've also made some really substantial investments around diversity of voice. We saw the podcast space looked a lot like me and not a lot like Latinx, Black communities. And so we've stood up a bunch of different podcast networks to bring new voices into the medium. And that's been something that's been really critical for us. But I think you make a really good point is the last mile is how do you connect brands into these voices, right? And how do you do that in a very authentic way, which is the most overused word in the history of marketing. But how do you do that authentically? And I think one of the things that we do is we lean into our creative community and we talk to them a lot about the kinds of brands that they want to work with, the kinds of principles that matter to them. And then we do a pretty good job of matching that up. And, you know, we've taken a different approach with host-read ads. We do 100% host-read ads, which is pretty unique for a company of our size. It has caused indigestion when you think about sort of scaling a business like that. But we think it's the right thing for the medium. The intimacy of the message, the intimacy of the platform, the low ad load, the personalization around that. And so we take great pride in making sure that we're really matching up brands to a lot of our hosts and making those connections, because you can hear it as a listener, that endorsement, so to speak. And it just feels more thoughtful, more engaging, and I think really celebrates the medium for what it is.
Yeah. And Ayan, I want to give you a chance to jump in here. So I'm skipping around and making sure we get everybody. Because and I'm glad you mentioned this point, Carter, that the words authentic, finding your voice, these are overused terms, but yet they do deeply matter, despite the fact that they have been sort of a cliche.
Yeah.
And so how do you do that? You know, how do you surface your voice, particularly in spaces that still remain not just crowded in terms of the amount of players, but in that discovery?
So I had to go on my own journey. When I quit corporate, I had to really like find myself, find my voice and lean into it. And I found myself initially doing what I was supposed to do, right? And then I was like, girl, be you. You can be, there's no boundaries now. And so for me, when I started seeing people actually use the word authentic in my reviews, I was like, oh, I'm authentic. I like that. Okay. And I just really continue to lean into that and just say, okay, I'm just going to bring my full self to this, and whoever wants to listen to it will, whoever wants to work with me, they will. And, you know, in terms of advertisers, I didn't take on advertisers for like maybe the first 2 years years. And when I started taking on advertisers, it was things that I was either really interested in, had already used, or like I wanted to use and share with my listeners what the experience was. And it wasn't a necessity for me to bring that over to social media, but I would do it anyway because I'm giving you my full experience with it. Away luggage, okay, they sent me some away. I'll unbox it. I'll show you guys what I'm doing. I'll tell you how it performed on my first trip, all of that, because I feel like that just allowed people to trust me more because they knew that I wasn't like BSing them. I was really, really talking about things that I was really interested in or using already.
And Steve, I want to give you a chance to jump in there because in your opening statement, you mentioned this idea of there still being fear for people to jump into the podcast space, right? So it seems like some of this authenticity, some of this real voice might actually be maybe scaring some advertisers away.
I don't know if, that may be one of the reasons. I think what I was more alluding to is the fact that, some of the larger brands that are out there are still possibly entrenched in, some of the measurement aspects of it are still a little bit more difficult to understand. When is a download? So that was more the sort of perspective where it's for want of a better term, the unicorn brands or the startup brands that are a little bit more braver and will basically jump in where they can see a potential opportunity. And to Ayana's point, I think it stems from the fact that, thousands and thousands of podcasts are created from the reason of, first, it's not about I want to make money. Actually, I'm really passionate about this subject and I want to talk about it because there's nothing out there that actually talks to it. I listen to a lot of podcasts, probably none of them that you would probably listen to, the audience in this room. I listen passionately to podcasts around Arsenal Football Club, but not just about the team, about the transfers in January. You can find that stuff in the podcast universe. So people are actually finding those little pockets of stuff that really interests them. And as a consequence, because the host has started from a point of, well, I don't just want to make a lot of money. I really want to spend my time doing something I'm passionate about. There's automatically a connection with an audience that is unprecedented. And I think, in the same way, I don't want to use I'm going to use this comparison in the same way that we can dip into Netflix and use that content or consume that content in our own pace, how we want. I think podcasters absolutely offered that to consumers.
And I want to follow up on that because the measurement piece is something that is, I think most people within advertising and marketing would agree is somewhat challenging, right? Just because a commercial airs doesn't mean you see it. There's lots of things, commercials I mute, there's lots of ways that people can get around them. So are we using the right tools for a medium that seems to want to resist these conventional ways of being measured?
Well, we're using the tools that are available to us and the ad measurement companies that are out there. I think there's still a lot of space for improvement. Pixel tracking is still in its infancy to a degree with regards to podcasts. Obviously, there are vanity URLs, understanding sort of some of the basics around it. But I think it's a fair point. I think we're looking to the future to see who's going to come out and really be able to understand exactly what is going to be attributed from a message in a podcast. But yes, I think it's a fair point.
I'll let each of you actually take that.
I just want to add to it. It's not even just about the tools. It's about, are you approaching the medium with the right understanding, open-mindedness, perspective, because there is more to it than just the numbers. Someone can, and you've all heard this before, someone can have a really, really niche audience, but that audience delivers, that audience buys. And so it's really looking at it, not just like all these, we were talking about this before, not all these celebrities that are coming into this space are moving units. Some of the smaller podcasters who have been around for a long time and have a really developed relationship with their audience, those are the people who are really moving units. So stop asking people just about their downloads and everything. And like you said, I fast forward through people's podcast ads all the time. Like if I don't really rock with them, then I'm just like, whatever, I don't need to listen to this, So it's just paying attention to what the value is that the podcaster can bring from a big picture standpoint versus just this little narrow number.
100% agree. As an agency leader, when we've done pitches and taken on business from clients that have come from very esteemed competitive agencies, we've looked at their plans and there's been 10 or 12 podcasts on the plan. And maybe they're the big hitters, right? But then you say, well, yeah, but the audience isn't really connecting with this content. They're not connecting with the host, and we'll take back a, respective revised plan. There could be upwards of 100, 200 podcasts on there with tiny pieces, tiny reach, but cumulatively together, you're getting a much more engaged audience. And, when you trust and download a piece of content onto your phone that you're actually going to listen to on your own time, it's because you want to hear that person and you want to engage with that person.
And Carter, I'll let you jump in there as well.
The only thing I would say is that, this measurement thing gets brought up so much. There has been so much advancement in measurement in the last 18 months. Sometimes we just don't celebrate how far we've come. The same people who want to measure streaming audio, you can use the exact same tactics to measure podcasting. And yet people look at me like I have three heads when I say we have measurement capabilities. There's upper funnel metrics, there's mid funnel, and there's lower funnel metrics. And now you've got offline metrics that people are starting to push with Catalina and some of these other guys. So I do think measurement will continue to evolve. I think you're so right about what to measure and how to measure it. And it's not all about a demand fulfillment platform. And I think a lot of people have come into the medium thinking like a dollar has to turn into something on the back end. I think there's much more to the relationship dynamic that you can tap into and the trust between the creator and their audience. And that's something it's really tangible and something that people should value. And I'm not sure people have sort of applied metrics to that yet. So it may just be a different way of thinking around sort of the marketing funnel, because we are so attached to $1 in results in how many dollars out. But I think that, look, if you look at the last sort of 18 months of all the places that have really moved very, very quickly, I think measurement's been one of those places that you should be pretty proud of how fast it has moved. I think a lot of people have jumped into the space and seen the opportunity to sort of helping people understand sort of the efficacy of the platform.
And real quick, because I'm watching the time as it looms in front of me. But I want to jump into this point about the creators. And I think it's fair to say that in the early years and days of podcasting in this sort of audio, it was a very bottom up kind of creator focused space. Now we've seen a lot more money come into the space. There's consolidation in terms of major players. We're seeing more of these high profile celebrity deals. Do you think some of that has really changed the inner workings and the dynamics of how we're delivering this content? And if so, what's the long tail of that? And I'll start in the middle and then jump back out to Steve. So you're coming up next, Steve.
So let me make sure I understand your question correctly. Is it that how is the I'm sorry, I'm blanking right now. How is the creator, say the question again?
How the fact that we started with an industry that was focused on like a bottom-up approach. Now with the consolidation and the focus on like big celebrity deals, there's less of that.
Yeah.
Right. So how has that impacted all of us as creators as we look to come into the space?
I think it's unfolding. We're seeing it every day. And I think the reason I got stumped is because there's always so many things swirling around my mind when you talk about the way that things are evolving right now. It's a good thing, but it's a bad thing too. Part of the reason that a lot of people who are indie, smaller creators got into podcasting is because they were trying to find their voice. They were trying to find their people. They were looking for a connection point and they found it, right? And they were doing well and things were moving. And then all of a sudden, I feel like really pandemic, those times, people were not getting the money that they were getting from the other sources of income that they were receiving. And they were like, I need a backup plan. Podcasting became so many people's backup plan. And those of us who have been doing it for years now, I mean, like I said, my first 2 years, 2017 is when I started. I didn't get a check. I didn't. Because I was doing other things. And so those of us who are not looking at it as a money grab, we get annoyed by it because you're taking up space for people who really have something of quality to say and are really intentional with their words in their work and really want to connect and build a community and strengthen the voice around whatever it is that they're talking about. And then you have other people that are just coming in for shits and giggles. And it's like, no, we actually don't appreciate you and we don't respect you. and you're not a journalist also. There's other people hosts who have come in, and I heard someone, they made a huge mistake and they said, I consider myself a journalist. I'm like, but you're not, because if you were, you wouldn't have even done that. You wouldn't have even conducted that interview the way that you did. I've been doing this for years now, and because I come from PR, I do not call myself a journalist. I'm not a journalist. I interview people. I know how to dig deeper, and I know how to bring out good conversations, period.
And Steve, I want to jump in. Yeah, absolutely.
On that bombshell, no, I couldn't agree more. I think I think the question was also framed around celebrities. Right?
Yeah,
celebrities coming in and sucking the air out of the room. Well, firstly, it's a great
or
compliment.
high-profile celebrity,
High-profile
however we're
individuals.
defining that.
Yeah, exactly. But certainly it's a compliment, isn't it? I mean, if they're going to get involved, I'm sure that Jason Bateman wasn't worried too much about getting a check when he decided to start his podcast during the pandemic. But yeah, it does take a lot of the space away from folks like Ayana, who are coming from a different perspective on why they're creating a podcast. And it's why when we approach or we discuss with customers or businesses that want to get into the space, you need to just get the right balance. Yes, you can, of course, have those big hits and those flagship kind of shows, but at the same time, you've got to build it out and have a balanced media plan that's also going to reach those individuals who can really make a difference. And you know what? They're not as cost prohibitive. There always is a celebrity price tag.
Absolutely. I'm watching the time, and I see we have a little less than 5 minutes. So I want to give an opportunity to this happy, smiling audience to ask questions and address each or any of our panelists. I know no one in this room is shy. No one out is looking at me as being shy. So if there are any questions,
England's going to win the World
don't
Cup.
make me a liar. Okay.
Hi, this question is for Ayana, because as a person that also started and was able to carve her path through podcasting, that's where I started in 2016 and building my own platform, and that sort of leading to a lot of opportunities. But as we know, as people who start from the bottom, we are our hosts, we are our producers, we are our marketing team, we are our web development team, and that can drive a lot of gas out of the tank very quickly. So now that you've moved into this building your own media company around this, how are you still preserving the personal love of podcasting and audio, and striking that balance between building this brand and also sticking to like what podcasting offers, which is like the inherent truth of our stories and things of all that? Just overall, how do you still find that balance so that you can still carry that love in the future?
I think it's just pacing myself, and also just staying connected to the origin of the conversations, because the more that I hear people's stories and things like that, the more that I want to tell those stories. And there has also been an evolution for me too. I stopped doing Switch, Pivot, or Quit maybe like a couple years ago. And now as a spinoff, I do another podcast called Quit Playing Small, because I wrote a book called Quit Playing Small, but that was all a result of my audience and what I felt like they needed, and they wanted to hear. So I just use them to fuel me. And then I also look at other mediums and things that have nothing to do with podcasting to re-energize me when I'm feeling like a creative kind of slump, or if I'm feeling like I just need something to keep me going. I look into other spaces and kind of see what's going on, see what they're doing. And that will make me have an idea, and then I get excited all over again.
Awesome. Thank you for that question. And
Yeah. I was curious, and it's for anyone who can answer the question, just because compared to like TV podcasts being newer from like a media buying and planning standpoint, what advice are you all giving brands on like the duration of presence and how they show up in the programs? I think a lot of brands miss out on other platforms because their flight plan might be too short or too long or not well considered. So what questions should brands and folks who are advocating for brands to be present in these types of programs, what questions should they be asking or considerations they should be having?
do you want to jump in, Carter?
That's a great question.
Anybody who's investing in a show, if you're going to go show by show, we sort of encourage people to sort of stay through the whole season and sort of be part of sort of the story arc of the season, as opposed to coming in and out of it. That sometimes is easier said than done because people have certain flights and stuff that they're sort of working on, but we found that to be far more effective. It actually gives the host more creative license with the brand And I think over time, you start to see a much better sort of connective tissue between the audience, the host, and the brand when they invest in longer term sort of strategies. But I would say that in like marketing in general, you know, I mean, like that the idea of having these like week-long or month-long flights, I mean, how are you really going to be able to connect with the consumer that way? So that's one of the things that we really push. And then we've also tried to, we try and push a lot of the advertisers who with us to think about the creative that comes out of their host-read ads as a content farm. So how do you re-express some of those great reads into other forms of audio media? Because I think Steve and I would agree, like that's the biggest weakness in audio is creative. People just don't want to commit to the time and energy around developing really good creative. You're not winning a can for audio, right? Everybody's going there for TV commercials. And that's part of the problem. It's usually somebody, a low-level person who sits by the copier who's doing the creative on audio. And so we try and encourage people to sort of think more robustly about the creative experience with audio.
Okay, so we're literally out of time. But before we leave, I do want to say thank you to all of our panelists for joining us in this conversation. And thanks for all of you for sticking in there on a gloomy New York afternoon. Thank you so much.
Please welcome Rebecca Sullivan and Ryan Barwick.
I heard your voice and I was like, oh my God, it's Katie. What's up? How's it going?
Hi again. Hi, Ryan. Thanks for joining us. No.
Hello.
Hello.
It's on, yes.
It's on. So we just were talking back there and could you explain to the audience, we all should know who Morning Brew is, but just explain a little bit about the publication, the platform, and what you do for them.
Yeah, of course. So Morning Brew is a financial and business newsletter. The daily newsletter has like 3 to 4 million subscribers, I should know. And since then, we've branched out to include marketing brew, IT brew, healthcare brew, retail brew, HR brew, and I'm missing a couple other brews. I was like the 5th reporter hired, and now there's like 50 of us. And I've been there almost 2 years. So it's crazy. And yeah, so the daily is usually some sort of you should all subscribe. Come on, let's go. Yeah, there we go. So the daily is like an aggregated newsletter of just kind of things that are going on that you read in the morning. And then each vertical is reported. So, you know, I am doing original reporting that goes out in a separate newsletter. And yeah, it's a great company. Please subscribe.
Yeah, it seems to have grown pretty fast.
Yeah, it's been a wild, wild ride. When I came to Morning Brew, I wanted to do original reporting. And they said, well, that's the direction we're going in. And since then, we've started to, it's really exciting because as of recently, we started to get scoops. We started to break news. You start to see in the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal, Morning Brew reported first.
Oh, that's awesome.
And that is, we're really proud of that.
Congratulations. So I'm just going to ask you just a few questions I'm pretty curious about. So which journalists do you follow and admire and why?
Yeah. So for my beat specifically, I cover media and tech on the Marketing Brew newsletter. And that involves everything from Google to weird ad tech companies you've never heard of, but you've tried to pitch me in your inbox. I think Craig Silverman, who's a ProPublica reporter, he used to work at BuzzFeed. He wrote about ad fraud and he just like made that beat his own and destroyed it. And he now works at ProPublica covering Google and Facebook and those kind of big tech companies. And I've told Craig, like, I'm trying to rip off his career because I think any reporter that can create their own beat and really make it their own, I think is really inspiring. And then Ronan Shields, who works at Digiday, we used to work at Adweek together. And on top of just being like the sweetest person in the world, he's so freaking smart and he knows everyone. And it's just one of those things where you'll be like, oh my God, I just interviewed this guy. And he'd say, oh, I just got lunch with him. How'd it go? And it's just like, you're always like right behind Ronan. And he's just a dear. And I really just, I'm so inspired by his work because he makes this boring ad tech stuff digestible and relevant and interesting. So I think he's just a real inspiration.
Yeah, that's hard to do.
Yeah, don't tell him I said that if you're going to talk to him.
So just tell us like just one of your favorite recent pitches that was successful that maybe one of us sent you.
That's a great question. I try not to do stories, not because of the quality of the pitch, but I think most reporters really try not to do stories based on a pitch, but usually it's, oh, maybe I do want to talk to this chief content officer, or this chief revenue officer. So I'm trying to think of a story I've done on a pitch. I will say that I was doing a story. It's the end of the year, so every hack reporter is trying to get out as many end of the year stories as possible. And I was like, we were like kind of debating like, well, what are we going to do? We can't do the metaverse. We can't do Web3 as overhyped. That's too obvious. And then in my inbox, literally during the pitch meeting, I got like the IAB's guide to the metaverse. And the IAB was like, do you want to talk to one of our people about the metaverse? And I was like, of course. So they ended up getting in the story. So I think that is to say a pitch that is, do you want to talk to someone who is important? Please. Like that is generally all I need. I don't really need a ton of background. If they work for a relevant company or they're doing something interesting and that's clearly stated, then I'll generally talk to them.
Okay. Where do you get some of your best ideas? You mentioned ProPublica, that reporter.
Yeah, I think, and it's it'll be a bummer if it shuts down, but I'm on Twitter like constantly. I am DMing sources constantly. I'm talking with sources on Signal, and usually it's and that's actually one of the things that would be my one part of advice. And this is terrible advice. That's why I'll never probably work in PR is you should really like share phone numbers and you should share email addresses. I know you probably don't want to do that with your CEO, with your chief investment officer, but like, I think if you really want to get written about, like give their phone number to a reporter because I will talk to them. I will chat with them. I will talk with them all day. And it's oftentimes not to get scoops or to get something salacious. It's like to confirm kind of what you're hearing, or is this an idea? Well, is this an idea? Well, who should I talk to? I think developing those relationships, being able to develop those relationships with sources is where the best stories come from. So I would say I get stories from talking to sources for a long time. And then eventually we will stumble and trip into an idea. And I'll say, well, should we talk for that story? And they'll be like, yeah, let me check with my PR people.
Yeah, good. I like it. So what industry trends are you excited about right now, like on your beat?
Yeah, it's a good question. I am really curious, and no one really seems, probably not so much in this room because it's not as relevant because it's not really a creative thing. But if you've been following what the FTC has been doing, they're really going after like the I shouldn't say going after. They've taken a considerable amount of interest in the digital advertising ecosystem. They're suing a data broker right now for selling location data. They just settled with Google for misleading ads. They're currently, it was reported yesterday, they are investigating crypto companies for misleading ads. So the FTC, one of the most powerful regulators in the entire country, is looking at the advertising industry, like very specifically, and potentially hiring people to understand digital advertising. So that is a trend that I wish I could predict to see where that goes and how it unfolds. But it's certainly fascinating. And then even at the state level, we've got state privacy laws. The IAB has said that state privacy will be more detrimental, more complex to advertisers than the loss of cookies. And you hear that, and then it just kind of floats away because it's privacy law and no one really cares, but that will have major impacts to everyone in this room. So that has been a personal like nerd out of mine that I've really tried to tackle and understand.
Cool. So we kind of talked about this when we were pre-gaming this thing, is take us through your day and week. And you said, I really just sit and write, but what's your sort of day like, how you plan your story? Do you meet with your editor? How does that all work?
Yeah. So on my team, Marketing Brew, we have a meeting every Monday at 11 o'clock. Usually I think every reporter comes to the meeting with like 2 or 3 like half-baked ideas. And then throughout the rest of the week, we've always got like 3 to 4 stories that we're working on, which is to say, like I am usually working on 3 to 4 stories, which is why a pitch that is, hey, talk to this person about this, or hey, I've got a few clients to, are any of them more relevant? that is usually a better approach than a story pitch, I guess, if that makes sense. Don't say like, hey, do this story. Here's the entire story in the email. Just be like, hey, we've got this person who might want to talk about something relevant. Because if I'm working on 3 to 4 stories, it might not make sense for whatever you're pitching, but they might work for this other story I'm working on. And you never know who's going to be able to give a good quote. So I guess my day is, I'm constantly working on 3 to 4 stories, try to write in the morning, do interviews in the afternoon. But the fun part of the job is it changes all the time. So.
Great. And we have 1 minute left. So what was your best performing story so far? Like that you could think that you're really proud of or that got a lot of traction?
Yeah. 2 of them. I did a story, and of course, this was not a pitch from anyone here. I was working with a researcher, and I was given an intern on a story. And we saw that people were playing the game Subway Surfer. Has anyone played that app, Subway Surfer? It's like a mobile app you play, you know, it's like a Temple Runner or whatever. Like, you know, those, we're all familiar. Anyway, people were playing that game, and then an ad would jump up and it would say, to keep playing, watch the ad. And then when you clicked on the ad, it would bring you to the LA Times. It would bring you to like Vanity Fair. So publishers, which this is not kosher, were buying traffic from the game. Not good, right? And it turns out, like, if you look at any of the industry guidelines and third parties, it's this kind of gray area. You're not really supposed to buy traffic, but it's kind of unregulated and it's kind of unclear. So my story just basically spelled it out, that publishers are buying traffic. They're not telling their advertisers. And is this a problem? And I went to the MRC and they said, eh. So I don't know what that says about the industry.
Okay, that's
but yeah.
interesting. I'm gonna have to stop you.
Yeah,
You're gonna have to tell people the second story outside later.
No, this is good. That's the story.
Okay. Well, thank you for joining us and good luck with the rest of the year.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Please welcome back Tony Lee.
Hi, it's me again. All right, I know it's like I'm the one who's between you and cocktails at some great Mexican restaurant with lots of tequila that I'm looking forward to. But this is a panel on new business perspectives on PR. And I've put together what I think is an amazing panel. I think as a PR person that it's really important that a PR person works really closely with PR. New business and PR work together. It has to, what we do as PR people has to drive biz development. I had a call this week actually with a client who said the best new business leads I've gotten all year are from the PR that you have driven for us. And I was like, oh my God, can I put that on my website? Like that was amazing. So with us today are 3 executives who all have different connections to the biz dev side of things. I'm going to let everybody introduce themselves and then we can start our conversation. Start with Simone.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much. I'm Simone Oppenheimer-Mendel, and I'm the co-founder of NBZ.
Hi, I'm Laura Kona. I'm Chief Growth Officer of North America for Wunderman Thompson.
Hi, everybody. I'm Dave Edwards. I run growth at a company called R3. We're global marketing consultants, and it's great to be here at Ogilvy. There's a bunch of Ogilvy people here, alumni, and I was here in 2000 to 2005. There you go.
It's interesting because, you know, Simone worked on the new business side here at Ogilvy, is now a new business consultant. Dave worked on the agency side at RGA and is now working for a search consultant. And Laura is a CMO at Wunderman Thompson. So everybody has kind of a different perspective. And I think that is going to make this conversation really interesting, informative, and hopefully really helpful for everyone. So I want to start, and it's interesting, when we had our kind of pre-game, Dave said, I hate those conversations where they ask each one to say what they think about something because it's repetitive. But in this instance, it really isn't, because everybody is coming at it from a different perspective. So I'm just going to start by asking everybody to tell me about what you read in the morning. Like, what for you is the most important publications? What do you start your day with?
Mine's LinkedIn. And I know it's a platform, or you can probably call it a publication these days, because it is my network's filtered content for the day. And so I trust my network. I love my network, spent so many years developing it. And so the first thing I pull up in the morning is curated content from my network on what do I need to know at 8 a.m. this morning.
Yeah, I would say exactly the same. I start with LinkedIn. I also scroll through Instagram. And then I would also say I look at the ad week alerts, I look at the ad age alerts. And then I think, sometimes like on a very good day, I might check out The Economist or the Wall Street Journal just to see how like the business side of things is doing.
Wow, nice.
That's like a very good day. And a very rare day, I would
Sure.
say, like,
The Economist, Laura. Same as you, but also things like folks are familiar with Winmo. If you're new business people, there's something called Winmo, which is a lead generation tool. But they have an article. When I wake up, the email is in my email box, so it's sort of curated for me to see what's going on, and the regular stuff. And Twitter, yeah. I mean, I think we all are all over Twitter as well. So marketing Twitter is good.
A separate channel, marketing Twitter.
Marketing Twitter, separate channel.
Right. So when you're talking to clients, what are they reading? What is it that is attracting their attention to you or to an agency or to, for you, Dave, for example, you're doing a search and somebody says, I want to have this agency because I read about them.
Because it's usually that they haven't necessarily read about them, but when we're running an agency, we like to say when we're running an agency search and we run 50 a year, we like to say the largest agency in the world is MCA. It's called My Cousin's Agency. So it's not so much that they've read about them, but the CMOs that we work with, they read the same things that we're reading. They're reading Ad Week and Ad Age as well, and reading about the agencies that are listed there. Yeah.
For you, Laura, are there clients who say we saw something?
I think they're having to read a lot today. Like, I think they have to read. I mean, they're reading a lot through LinkedIn as well, very similar to us. But then I also think they're reading their own trades. They're reading up on technology. I think it's very confusing time for a CMO. And so it gives us a good perspective just in terms of how we can provide value to them when we reach out to them.
Totally agree. I also think, we have to admit that work begets work, right? And we work a lot with small and mid-sized agencies, and they say, well, I haven't put that piece of work out there in the past year or two. How can I put out work that begets more work, right? And so in that instance, I think perhaps it's less about the one article and it's more about the groundswell. And as PR professionals, I'm sure you agree that it's more about the groundswell of the agency brand. And so it's putting out thought leadership. It's, doing panels. It's appearing at conferences and networking. So it's really about, I think, in order to get a client's attention, it's about what are you doing as an agency brand to create a groundswell around the business.
So you're like a great spokesperson for the power of PR. Thank you.
Any day, anytime, I'm here.
I'm curious about like what you think are the best stories. So, from a perspective of what is going to get an agency the most attention? Is it putting out news about a big account win? Is it a great creative story? Is it something that they've done in media? What do you think from a PR communications perspective, we should all be focusing on? And Dave, let's start with you.
Yeah, I mean, I'll take it actually from the consultant perspective. And Simone and I are in a similar business here, what we're doing. So we always like to say that the PR, and we get this all the time, right? We always like to get emails on a regular basis from the agencies. We like to know about new business wins. We like to know about new work. We love seeing work. And then we like to read about new hires as well. And also any, diversity, equity, inclusion programs that you have. We like to know about it because it's just one of the services that we perform. We look at the talent diversity of agencies and benchmark that. So so if there are agencies out there, obviously just, email us. We like to know what's going on.
I would say, just to add to that, like for us, we use PR in two ways. One is to credentialize us in our decks and how we talk about the strength of our work and also the strength of the agency. We also then use it to build the reputation so that there's name recognition before the pitch even comes up for review. So the stories that I think work the best for clients in terms of the ones that I find that they actually are reading the most would probably be more, is it a piece of work that they've seen and they're trying to figure out like what agency actually did that? We find a lot, like we'll get in the room and they can't name the agency that did the piece of work, but they're like, oh, that story of blah, blah, like they'll remember that. And then I'd also say it's the ones that make them actually think differently about how they use different channels or different technology. We had a piece earlier in the year that was about the metaverse, and specifically, I think we got like Brian Bonilla in there with us playing around, and it was a fun sort of experiment. And I think that was a good one as well.
I think I love what you said, Laura, about thinking differently, because of course we should put the work out there. We should market anything that's happening that's impressive for the agency. But again, like I said earlier, not every agency has that opportunity, especially the small and the mid-sized founder-led independent agencies. Woo! Right? They don't necessarily always have that opportunity. And so where I think, tell me if you're agreeing with this, what you're saying, it's about value. It's about giving your clients something of value, a new perspective on how you use a technology. Or if your chief strategy officer came up with this amazing idea, or strategy for a pitch, whether you win or lost, there's an opportunity to take that and create a story about it, right? Thinking about what are we putting our efforts into and how can we share that with people that care, that's valuable, right? What am I putting out there that's valuable to the clients that I want to pull in?
Great, that's great, and good advice. I want to talk about what you do with that PR, right? So we're all kind of, stressing about, will we get it picked up in Ad Week? Will we get this picked up in Ad Age? We've got a little mention in Media Post. There's a cumulative effect to it, but there's quality, I believe, over quantity. What is the best way for an agency to put that work out? Because, and I say this all the time, just because it ran somewhere doesn't mean anybody's going to see it. You have to actually have a plan to make sure it gets out there. So, Simone, what would be some of the best practices you're seeing?
So it's, when agencies ask, should I put this piece, where should I put it? Should I pitch it out? Should I put it on, our blog? I always say pitch it first, right? Because a lot of people here have the audiences that we want, right? And so we're not asking people, we're not pulling necessarily people into our websites, our agency websites, because we want all this traffic. We want people to see us in the places that they are. So yes, get it picked up in all the wonderful trades that we're so lucky to have in our industry. But like you said, Tony, it's not enough to just get it placed. What are you doing with that? Do you have a plan for your executives and how they're utilizing their network to amplify that story? That is where the interactions happen. That's where you're going to get comments and feedback. And you can have starting a dialogue that really just with the algorithm just pushes it up into the inboxes or the LinkedIn feeds that you want your clients to see. So it's really about giving everybody internally a role in the organization as to what they need to do and what their responsibilities are for PR on their own platforms, their own channels, with their own voices.
Laura,
make the algorithms work. I mean, it's like for us, it's as simple and as complex as that. If we could get every single leader to share what gets out there, that would be amazing. But I think, for us, we use it, just like I said, it's credentializing ourselves. It's also, it's building that groundswell that I think you talked about earlier, I would love at the end of the year for everyone to feel like, what the heck is happening at Wunderman Thompson right now? That's kind of amazing. And I've seen their work. But the truth is it needs to be valuable. PR just can't be stories for story's sake. It has to be about they saw something interesting in our work, or we're thinking differently about technology and data, and they're using AI. Like, I think that is what is actually important to our growth business.
Yeah, and I think I would add that, and we heard this in a few of the panels earlier. I think maybe Shannon Miller said it, but they want to hear about like kind of the backstory on how that ad was created or who was behind the ad. So I think you're always just trying to find very interesting, unusual stuff. Like, what is going on at Wunderman Thompson, by the way? I need to ask you about that. But yeah, just some really interesting and clever sort of backstory on why an ad was created or how a director was chosen. I think you're just looking for something different that I think the journalists are going to want to hear from.
And supporting our clients.
Yeah.
Like that's another key thing is making sure that the work gets publicized so that our clients also see the value in, making big work.
So most of what you're talking about right now is LinkedIn and really using and leveraging that platform, which I think is really powerful. And sometimes you're not going to get that story, that behind the scenes story, I think Kai was really interesting this when she kicked this off, saying, tell us the stories about the people in the middle there and how they rose to kind of bring some of this stuff to life. And maybe LinkedIn is that platform for telling those stories because, having an editorial calendar, a LinkedIn editorial calendar that's very robust, that you have your executives pushing out. One of the things I tell my clients is it's not just the company that needs to put this out. The company doesn't have as many followers as your CEO or your creative director. Those are the people who have the following. So you need to help give them the fuel to tell these stories and then share them. And maybe the company shares it from them so that you're really tapping into even a much larger audience. But beyond LinkedIn, I want to ask about newsletters because I'm a really big fan of company newsletters. How often? What should they have? Who is it going to? What are you getting in your inbox, Dave?
Yeah, well, every day we get newsletters in different forms from all of the agencies. And what's interesting, I would say 75% of them are really slick HTML, really nicely produced emails. And the other 25% are just, I wouldn't say handwritten, but they're just regular emails with some links in it. This is just me. I prefer the 25%. I prefer the more personal touch versus the HTML email that just kind of looks like every other email that I get from, ad tech platform companies. And I know you all spend a lot of time on the HTML, and I'm not saying not to do it because maybe you have a different thought, but I just like the real personal touch, just a regular old email with some links. It's also easier for me to say. Because I'm old.
No, same thought. I mean, look, like I can't remember the last time we sent an email and got a reply to it. But I will say that like 90% of the time that we actually send something out via just a personal message, we will get a response to it.
I would never, and in fact, I never reply to an HTML email, but if someone sends me something that's just a regular email, we always respond.
And 90% of the time, it's also Dave responding.
So who is sending it to you? Is it coming from the CEO? Is it coming from the CMO? Is it coming from an account director? Who's sending it to you?
Most of the time, it's the CMOs at the agency, someone on the marketing team. A lot of them are obviously using, MailChimp and HubSpot and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, it's typically some CMO at the agency.
I think it's about, first of all, how many resources do you have, right? When you have a bunch of resources in your agency marketing team, it's much easier to pull these things together. So I would first say, let's talk about how many resources you have. Let's talk about what the strategy is and what you want to accomplish with it. Because newsletters might be totally fine. But how do they operate within the universe of communications? And what are they being used? What is it being used for? And what do we want to accomplish with it? There's also a great thing about taking the content that, let's say we're creating, let's say for these newsletters, and putting them on LinkedIn. What else are you doing with it? It's going to spend a lot of time putting these newsletters together. Let's get the biggest bang for our buck and let's find the strategy to put that news and use that work in all different channels.
Does it make sense to put something out quarterly? Should there be an option where you get something like the day of a big piece of news? What is kind of the tempo?
I think nothing beats a personal connection. So even though like you might need to do that in order, like if you have the scale and you have the team in order to do that, great. I think so long as somebody can still follow through and make it personal to the clients that you're either prospecting or to, the consultants that you need to connect with. We actually, we have this amazing platform that we've been doing for like 20, 30 years of 100 trends for us. And it is like what I would call a data honeypot, like 20,000 or so marketers download it every single year. But what's also incredible is that and I'm almost embarrassed to admit this, but like, we haven't necessarily been following through on all of those leads that just come directly to us. And so I think if you're going to take the time and effort to do these things, you also have to be able to do all of the follow through to create those personal, meaningful moments.
Well, that's one of my questions here, and it's about reports and studies, because we talked to some of the press earlier today in our lightning rounds about, how important those things are. And, I just kind of, you guys have, Wonderman Thompson, you kind of own this little space in this study that you've been doing for, I don't know, however many years.
Since I started at JVT, so that was like a while ago. Harley was there.
But, are you seeing those, Dave? Are those coming separately? What kind of studies, reports do you think agencies should be putting out? Should they? And
Yeah, we get them all the time. The one I can think of is like Stagwell just puts out a lot of like studies. And those are the ones that I'm getting that come straight from Ryan Linder, their global CMO. I'm not doing a plug for him. He's a good guy, but they do a lot of studies. And I know for him, he sends out a weekly email, which is crazy. And so he's got a team of people writing it, I guess. But yeah, they do an awful lot of studies. I see that. And Deloitte Digital does it too. And some of the bigger agencies that just have, tons of people who can do the studies, who can do the research. That's what we're seeing.
Because they provide value, right? And it doesn't feel like a sales email when you're giving someone something that they would find valuable and helpful in their next meeting.
right. So it's an investment from a new business perspective, right? Showing that you have thought leadership, that you have, that you understand whether it's the trends in the market or helping clients navigate, whether it's a new technology or something like that. It then becomes fodder for the press. It becomes fodder for your LinkedIn. It becomes fodder for your newsletter. So it serves a multiplicity of audiences.
That's what we do at R3, right? So for new business, I work hand in hand with our marketing team. We're a small company, 100 people. And I've worked at big agencies where the marketing team and the business development team didn't work together at all, was totally on separate sides of the building. And I've worked at agencies and now consultancy where I meet with my marketing person all the time. And she's always asking me, so what are clients or prospects asking about? I was like, well, they're talking about in-housing. And like a week and a half later, I have like a 2-pager, which is fine on in-housing. And I use that as, for prospecting. So we're always I'm trying to give value to someone. I mean, when Tony and I, Tony worked with me at Been There, Done That, which was an agency I worked at before R3. We met with Tony every single week. Tony would always say, hey, what's going on? What are people asking for? And then all of a sudden we would have relevant content, whether it was a work study that we did, just relevant content.
Yeah.
And it's relevant content to where the agency wants to grow also, right? So I think there's, from a new business and PR partnership, it's a really important relationship, because everything that you're working on from a new business perspective, where we want to grow, how do we want to grow, who do we want to pull in, what type of client do we want to next, what type of relationships do we do best with, what does success look like in a year from now? It's so important to have that PR partner so that it doesn't necessarily, like you said earlier, become a quantity play on pickup for the agency, because a quality play and really supports the trajectory or the hopeful trajectory of the agency.
Well, that's my next question.
Oh, sorry, Tony.
Well done, Simone.
And that's okay. It's about where you want to grow, what sectors, and how do you work with PR to do that? Maybe Laura?
We chop up, like with our, we've been chopping it up into different categories. And then somebody mentioned it earlier, I think it was you, about using that to then create content for social media. So we'll send them directly to clients. We will obviously email them newsletters, but then, we'll have to put it. And I think it's a good opportunity to both demonstrate the work that we're doing and also demonstrating the thinking and the people behind the work, which helps in the new business room. The more there's recognition of the people that come into the new business room, the better I think you'll also do.
All right. Well, we have.
Agreed. Sorry, Laura. Rebecca Sullivan. Wait for your mic.
She always has a question.
RGA, you know, you were like known as like this superstar, you know, like growth person. And so did you do newsletters or did you do personal notes? Like, yeah, I'm curious.
So
You're seeing like both sides and what you would, you know.
yeah, so we did both. So the marketing was a big marketing team or communications team at RGA, and Suzanne was on that team too. And they put out some fantastic newsletters. I don't remember the frequency or the sequencing, but then the new business team, we did our own, and I did the ones I mentioned before that I like to receive, and I would send those to the consultants and some CMOs that we needed that we knew. It probably shouldn't have been like that. We shouldn't have done these separate things. It should have been a coordinated effort. For whatever reason, it wasn't. Yeah, so we did both those things. Great question.
Suzanne? I'm going to add, and Chapin underscored this too. You sent a lot out yourself. And I think that was part of, and you called it out, that was a part of the success story. We can do great stuff. We can use Microsoft. We can use all sorts of products, Marketo, et cetera. But having someone like a Dave who will send out personal emails makes a big difference. And I think that, trusting your executive to do that, sometimes I know isn't easy, but Dave was easy. He was very trusting, very easy to communicate with. I know, but I'm calling out that. But I will also tell you, Dave also did weather on the side. And as a comms person, it was great. He would get out there and he would tell the weather wherever he was. So like side note, if you have an exec that loves to do something like that, let him do it. It was awesome. I'm still a fan of the weatherman.
RGA was very supportive of this side hustle of being an amateur meteorologist. And if you go on Instagram and follow me at Weather Edwards, although I'm on a hiatus, I told Simone I'm retooling right now.
David understood the power of a personal brand before anybody else did. Before LinkedIn even existed.
I am micro famous.
Micro famous.
My client, we had him do a whole podcast with Ishan Sherwood on his Weather Edwards. Yeah.
What
so
weather? I'm actually curious.
I have to think about it. I've been obsessed with the weather since I was in like high school and took an atmospheric science class. And that's why I don't, yeah.
Fun.
Yeah.
All right.
I did have a sponsor, Jack Sturbrew Coffee. They have 7 locations in New York. I remember the CMO who was a friend of mine. He was like, "Hey, I want to hire you guys. I want to hire you as a sponsor, to sponsor us and whatever." And I gave him a price on how much it would cost. And he's like, "Dude, that's like Starbucks money." And so we settled on something a little lower.
That's the power of personal brand.
We did it for 4 months.
We are almost out of time. Does anyone have any more questions?
And I want to make sure I ask someone to take a picture of us right after this question. Can I ask you if I give you my phone? Is that okay? Sorry.
Is it on? So Dave, not to steal your thunder, but to redirect back to the panel.
So good.
Well done.
This may be off topic, but I don't think it is. You mentioned that there was a story about you were looking at a campaign and people couldn't tell you who did it, but they could remember the campaign. So the question really is this: do you think there would be value if it was a matter of kind of policy that anytime someone gets up in front of a room to present a case history, that they acknowledge the contributions of their partners?
Yes.
There are two.
If you want to take that on, I will be forever indebted.
You mean like if a CMO of a brand is talking about the campaign, should he or she mention the?
She should. The question would be, wouldn't it be nice?
Yes.
If
That's very
they acknowledged the contributions of a partner. Now, they could be too many to get into, and I respect that. But if at least they acknowledge that this was made possible by working with a partner, you get the value of a third-party endorsement, which is why we're all kind of in this room.
Exactly.
And you also get a demonstration that that might be someone I like to work with because they appreciate the contributions of other people. So I'm asking, as people in business development, if you think that would be something that would be helpful.
Absolutely.
And something
Yeah, I
you
mean,
should
look,
try
we
to
never
do.
fault clients because I do think there's different, you can't understand completely what their culture is at their company and what they're trying to achieve on a personal level. I do think on the other hand, we were at ANA in a couple of weeks ago, and it did strike me how many CMOs were up on stage and didn't even mention their
Most
agency.
don't, like
Yeah.
5%.
And so, yeah, of course it would help. And look, like, I think in a lot of the work that we're doing today, if we're just all being honest with each other, we are making a certain level of investment. Are we profitable? Of course, but like on the big ideas that we're doing, there is some investment into it. And so we count on that work being seen, and we count on the referrals that CMOs and clients give us.
Well, I was thinking of it as a vehicle to help you in your jobs have more information, in addition to obviously a little bit of the self-serving nature. And I do think it might be something that people should get together and put together a checklist. So there's a tip list. Whenever anybody goes and makes a presentation, you should acknowledge your partners, or if you show work, say who did it, or you should blog about it and talk about how that makes you look better as a partner. That was the question.
Absolutely. So long as at the end of the day, I still want the work being seen. Like that above all else is the most important thing, because if they remember the work, then they're going to look up the agency. And so long as we're searchable, they will find who we are.
Yeah, but if you win the
Which
USA
is
Today
amazing,
ad
of course.
meter, you don't want them to just remember the ad. You want them to know who actually did it.
Rhetorical question, but yes, I agree with you.
Thank you, Roy. All right, that's flashing 0, 0, 0. 0.
We're going to take a picture right here of the four of us, right?
All right, one more person. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Tony.
Thank you, Tony. Please welcome David Ford.
Turn it over to Dave. Turn it over to Dave.
I think that was a great way for us to end the afternoon, because I do think that at the end of the day, what we do really is about bolstering our agency's reputation that allows us to attract great talent. It allows us to do bolder, braver work. And at the end of the day, we all work for businesses that are looking to grow and be profitable. So I think we as, agency communications professionals play a huge role in that. And I loved hearing to some of the examples in terms of, the fact that when people read about work, when people read about the stories behind the work, when they read about the hires, when they read about the wins, those all do matter in terms of attracting attention. So everyone give yourself a little bit of a pat on the back, because I think we do a lot of great stuff. And I think sometimes we end up in these little islands because we are these connectors within our companies. So I just want to say thank you to all of you for the work that you do every day for your companies. Because without us, not everybody would know everything that we have going on. Well, listen, that's a wrap. So on behalf of the 4A's, on behalf of the Agency Communications Committee, thank you for taking out some of the time in your afternoons to spend with us. I hope that the agenda was something that you all found engaging and found there were some takeaways and learnings that you had. That's what we try to do when we do this event every other year. Seeing if there's any other things in my notes. I want to thank again our sponsor, NewsWhip. Without them, we would not necessarily be able to have as fruitful of an event as we did today. Oh, and there's a survey, so make sure you fill out the survey. And obviously, this is just one event that the 4A's does for its members every year. So just a few plugs. I want to ask you to join the 4A's in New York and virtually on February 1st and 2nd for Decisions 2023, which is, the 4A's, one of their big signature conferences that focuses on all aspects of media, data, and technology. The theme this year is perpetual disruption, and it'll explore the impact of digital on our very real world. We all know that there's lots of disruption happening these days. And again, for the whole day today was recorded. We will make sure that everyone who attended has access to the recording, so that if there's anything that you missed or want to go back and take notes on or share with colleagues, please do feel free. We'll send out some of the materials like Ken's deck and slides, as we mentioned earlier. Again, thank you so much for carving out time of your day. Thank you for everything that you do. I am going to head around the block shortly to a place called Tacombe, which is a Mexican restaurant. If anyone wants to come by and have a few margaritas, it's literally when you walk out the front door, you make a left, and it's on the left-hand side of the street, just on 24th Street. So it's raining, so it's not far. So just come if you want to come and have a drink. That's where I will be, and some other members of the committee will be. Again, the one thing, thank you to the committee, and specifically the planning committee. Many of who moderated sessions today. This is, we all are incredibly busy. So thank you to all of you who took time out of your schedules to help put together these sessions over the past 2 or 3 months. So my internal gratitude to all of you. So, and we'll see you for drinks.
To be young and in love in New York City. Do not know who I am, but still know